Thank you all for coming today to today's town hall, either in person or via Zoom. How's that sound working? In our presentation, we hope to convey the importance of the issues to provide you with a good understanding of the current compromised condition that we find Bay Scene in. In the near future, we will be requesting your approval to implement a special assessment that will fund the necessary repairs as presented today. Our focus today is to provide you with an appreciation of the importance of the repair projects we are recommending, along with the comprehensive and detailed process we have gone through to get to this point. And I'm going to get a count before we go. Just curious how many homeowners we have here on Zoom, how many units are represented in Zoom and in attendance, and I'll get that count later and report that. Little housekeeping. There is a bathroom in the back left corner to the left of the exit door. Please turn your cell phones to mute or to the volume mute, and also for people on Zoom, make sure you're on mute. The church has said no food or drink, water only. We will take questions. We're going to have two separate presentations by the consultants. We'll take a question and answer session after each of those. And time permitting, we'll have some time for questions and answers at the end, at the very end. If you don't get a chance to ask your question, or you think of questions later, please email them to me. We'll put them all together. We'll respond and send it out to everybody. So if you don't get a question asked today, you have an opportunity to do it in the future. You all should know my email address. It's what's sending all the agendas out, that same email address. We also intend to record the Zoom so that you can look at it later. Okay, next slide. Oh, where are the slides? We have an issues up there? Jim, we're on the slide, the timeline slide, the third slide, slide number 3. There we go. Okay, today's town hall is very important because these are make or break times for Bay Scene. As you all know, the complex is 50 years old, built between 1972 and 73. Over those 50 years, monthly homeowner fees have been kept relatively low. I'm aware of only 2 major repair projects accomplished to the structures over the past 50 years. About 25 years ago, the roof was resurfaced using reserve funds. About 15 years ago, the elevators were overhauled along with some minor additional non-cosmetic repairs funded through a $20,000 special assessment. Now, after 50 years, there are some major infrastructure concerns that need to be addressed. These concerns must be addressed, and we plan to continue to live at Bay Scene for the foreseeable future. They can no longer be kicked down the road. Next slide. Our consultant team will be presenting detailed information on 3 proposed special projects: structural repairs to the podium slab or garage roof, replacing the garage and catacomb waterproofing, and replacement of the window curtain wall. After each consultant, I already said this, you'll have time to ask questions. There will be a very short break between or after each of their presentations, a short break. We have also asked a mortgage broker, Mr. David Stein, to explain to interested homeowners various options to borrow funds to pay for their share of the proposed special assessment. Next slide. For clarity, you'll be hearing the term podium slab. The slide over here, the line in red is the podium slab. It is basically the roof of the underground parking garage, and we refer to that as the podium slab. The space directly above the garage and below the first floor units is referred to as either the catacombs or the crawl space. Next slide. Okay, this slide shows where the waterproofing is located that needs to be replaced. Basically, it is located above the garage roof, outside of the building footprint, along the outer walls and along the outer walls of the catacomb. The areas in red on that slide there. You'll get much more information on this in the consultant presentations. Next slide. This shows all the relevant studies we've gone through since this 2020. Approximately 10 years ago, the Bay Scene Board at that time began looking into replacing the windows. As this slide shows, what started as an investigation into our windows has morphed into something far more comprehensive. It seems that deeper we dug, the more we found that our problems were more extensive than we knew. Through our various studies, we now understand that Bay Scene is not a system of individual windows supported on each floor, rather an integrated curtain wall system that supports the windows. This means even if we wanted to, we can't pick and choose which windows to replace. It requires a replacement of the entire curtain wall system. Also, in response to homeowners' concerns following the June 2021 collapse of a Florida condominium, the board initiated an investigation to determine whether something like that could happen here. The structural condition assessment identified deficiencies in our podium slab that resulted in the need to erect shoring in the garage. Today, the consultants will be discussing not only the repairs necessary to resolve the current structural deficiencies, but also the root causes of those deficiencies and what needs to be done to prevent more problems in the future. Next slide. Next, if you're currently living at Bay Scene, you have noticed the shoring system installed in the garage at the strong recommendation of our structural engineer after the completion of the phase 1 structural investigation. We'll be able to remove the shoring once the structural repairs are made. Next slide. We would not be here today without the tremendous support of both our consultant team and the Bay Scene Infrastructure Committee, comprised of both Bay Scene Board of Directors and homeowners. Special thanks to Frank Kingery, who has been the project manager for our consulting contracts, and Bob Van, who oversees all the financial matters, including finding an institution that will loan the association the funds for the special assessment. Mike Nolan provides a legal perspective, and Marty is always making sure we see the perspective of often overlooked homeowners. Dan Messman has been a tireless contributor, willing to do anything, and is also instrumental in reaching out to homeowners. As the owner of a very successful architectural practice, John Sparr's expertise has been instrumental when reviewing consulting contracts and in helping us to understand the technical aspects of the projects. Last but not least, Jim Gottlieb has developed the Bay Scene website, which is very good. You should check it out, and it's comprehensive, easy to use section on the special assessment projects. He is also up there running the show today. Next slide. I will now turn the presentation over to Doug Whitmore, the principal architect of Whitmore Architects, a firm that specializes in investigating building failures in the context of construction defect litigation. The expertise of this firm has been very beneficial in identifying the condition of the 50-year-old structure of Bay Scene and determining what is needed to restore back to a functional condition. Doug will introduce the rest of the consultant team, who will give 2 presentations, which I've already said. Next slide, and I will turn it over to Doug. Doug.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Doug Whitmore. Thanks for the introduction, Bob. We have been working with Bay Scene for a couple of years now. Initially, we were working on the curtain wall system, and then, as Bob just mentioned, after investigating the condition of the podium slab, we were tasked with evaluating the waterproofing system that protects the podium slab. So we want to report on both of those things today, but before we do, I do want to introduce our team. I'm Doug Whitmore. I'm been practicing for about 40 years here in San Diego. Our office is up in the Kearny Mesa area on Ruffin Road. And with me today is Jeff Masnick. Jeff's up in the balcony, and he's been leading the project. So if anything that we've put together, it's kind of passed through Jeff's hands, and he's guided it to this point in time. And he's been working on all of the technical specifications and details that make this thing come together. Also, in addition, we have Kirsten Gambala. He's a senior project manager with the firm. And if you bumped into anybody here, it's probably been Kirsten from our team. He does our field investigations. And so where there were test pits, he's the guy that hopped down in the pit and did the looking around to see what the conditions of the membrane were. He's the guy that directed and did the crawl space inspections and garage inspections, and has also been in some of your units to look at the insides of the curtain walls, and the outside has directed our inspection of those units, those assemblies as well. We've been doing this, as Bob mentioned, for quite some time. We do consulting in the context of litigation. Basically, our specialty is broken buildings, if you will. But we also do repairs to structures and provide what's called building envelope consulting. The most recent consulting project for building envelopes was about a $20 million project at UCLA, where we were responsible for evaluating the windows and weather-resistant barriers and deck membranes and roofing and what have you on about 16 dormitory buildings, and then also on a brand new community building. A most recent repair job for condominium association that we worked on is a project in La Jolla called Montefaro. It's at the end of Genter Street, right below, way down, but below La Jolla Country Club. And that was a $7 million reconstruction repair project that we went through a variety of issues. Not the same as what we're going to talk to you about with Bay Scene, but similar in terms of how things were approached. And the general contractor for that project, for the repair project, we've brought onto our team. So the next person I'd like to introduce you to is Robbie Hauser. Robbie is the Director of Construction for Nautilus General Contractors, and they were the contractor on the Montefaro job. And we work with Nautilus both in repair jobs and also consulting, because costs are always important in that discussion. In addition to that, and Robbie's got Joe with him. I don't want to forget Joe. Joe's a senior project manager for them, and has kind of been making things happen, not unlike what Kirsten does for us. And you'll see, for example, a mock-up over here of the window wall system, and that's something that Joe's responsible for getting to us so you guys could see what we're talking about. And in addition to that, and a very key player in all of this, we have Jeremy Callister. Jeremy's a principal. Don't you stand, Jeremy? Jeremy's a principal with Degenkolb, a structural engineering firm in downtown San Diego. And Degenkolb is a regional engineering firm. They have offices along the west coast of the United States, probably more than that, but at least I'm familiar with that much. And we've worked with Jeremy over the past 5 years on a significant number of multi-family buildings, including a few of the high rises downtown San Diego that have either needed modifications or have had issues that we needed to address. So I think our team is pretty solid. The only other person that's on our team that's not represented is Jim Kenway. Jim is a fenestration consultant, so he just looks at windows and doors. And so he has sort of a narrow focus, but we like that about him because he knows everything there is to know about windows. And we send things to him to look over our shoulders and get his advice on. And he's just got a great reputation for doing this kind of work. Very practical, but always in mind with what the owners need at the end of the day. What is the right thing to do? So that's our team. We can start, Jim, if you want to get the slide up there. Go ahead to the next one. There we go. So you live at Bay Scene. You probably know this by heart, but of course there's 2 buildings here. They're made up of 4 towers. So most people at Bay Scene talk in terms of towers and not buildings. There are two towers along Gresham Street, and there are 2 towers along the north property line, which in this particular instance is on the base of this drawing. To the upper right-hand corner, which would be primarily southwest from Bay Scene, is Mission Bay, but you know it because Mission Bay runs all along there. You have 2 beautiful Torrey pine trees that are really marks of just how special this place is. Besides having a great view of Mission Bay and having a great location, those Torrey pines are just really cool. And in fact, this complex is a very neat complex. I'm sort of tacitly related to its founding father. The architect, Dan Salerno, was my boss at one point in time. And so I worked for Dan for about 5 years total. I worked there twice. And we knew this project because when I'd walk into the office, there was always a picture on the wall of the project. So it was not surprising when we showed up here. Next slide, please. You know what, Jim, could you go back though, actually? I do want you to see the red dashed line in that picture, in that illustration. That is the extent of the parking garage. So when you drive into the parking garage, it's down towards the lower left-hand corner there, but there is an L shape to the garage, and that's the location of, and you can see that the buildings sit on top they sit on top of the parking garage. So when Bob was talking about the podium deck, he's basically talking about the lid or the ceiling of the parking garage. Those buildings are sitting on top of that. And so when the board, after the failure of the condominium tower in Florida, in Seaside, charged not our team specifically, but Jeremy's firm with investigating the condition of the concrete. Of concern is the podium deck, because that's how the buildings are supported. Okay, now next slide. This is an overview of what we just talked about, but just another view in real life of what the 4 towers look like and where Mission Bay is. A little bit different angle. Next slide. So we're going to talk about a few things today, but they're all up on this screen. The curtain wall system or the vertical windows in your building. We're not talking about the balconies, nor are we talking about the sliding glass doors that are on those balconies when we talk about curtain walls. We're just talking about the vertical elements that are 5 stories high. We've also drawn here where the garage is. That's sort of the white band across the bottom, and you can see there's earth in brown below it, and there's earth in brown above it. So when you're walking on Bay Scene and you don't see the parking garage, it's because it's below ground. And there's landscaping, and there's a hardscape, and there are fountains, water features also on that. There are steps that go down to the pool. All of that's happening on top of the garage for the most part. Not totally, but for the most part. Okay, next slide. We will talk about the balconies in another sense, but I was really only wanting to say that in regard to the curtain wall, that we're really not talking about any of the glass that's on the balconies. We're just talking about the 5-story element. Okay, let's start with the waterproofing repairs. As Bob indicated, they charged Degenkolb, which is Jeremy's firm, with investigating the condition of the concrete that the buildings are founded upon. And so before we go too much farther, if you parked in the garage, you've probably seen this, but if you look up, there's quite a bit of efflorescence, and when it rains, there are places where water is leaking into the garage significantly. And to some degree, if you haven't noticed some of it, it's because in the past, as a temporary means of repair, little catchment devices were placed underneath big sheet metal pans, collected the water so that it didn't fall on people's cars. But there are still areas that aren't within those areas, and you can see this. This is after a recent rain. There's efflorescence, which is the white stuff. Basically, it's calcium salt deposits that the water leaches through and leaves on the surface of the concrete. And then there are wet areas. Obviously, the darker gray areas are the wet areas. Next slide, please. So here's evidence of efflorescence, which again is a little more longer term water coming through the podium deck, the lid of the garage, if you will. And to the point where on the right hand, if you got up close and saw this, there's little almost like stalactites of salt deposits that are coming down from the ceiling because of the water that's coming through there that just brings the minerals with it. Next slide. More evidence, it's easy to see if you go up and look at some of the ductwork that's in there, you'll see stains where the water has come down. There are areas where concrete has spalled, and when I say that term spall, I mean a chunk of the concrete fell out of the ceiling and onto the floor. So that's a concern from a safety standpoint for your sakes, but it's also a concern as it relates to the podium that's supporting 5 stories of building above it. Next slide. So at this point, I'm going to show you a few slides that Jeremy provided to me of a portion of their investigation, and I'm going to pause for just a minute and let him talk about the structural repairs. This is ad hoc, Jeremy, so you get to be put on the spot. But so during the course of their investigation, Degenkolb found places where the concrete had spalled significantly. The reinforcing steel, which are those rods, was exposed and corroded to the point where the corrosion had actually affected the cross section of the reinforcing steel. In other words, it's getting weaker. Next slide. And it didn't just happen once, and it didn't just happen a couple of times in the garage. It happened a few times in the garage and also on the top of the garage. Once you go into those catacombs or the crawl spaces that we're talking about, it was also found in those cases, in those conditions as well. Next slide. So these are the kinds of things that Jeremy's crew came across during their investigation. Next slide. Now we're in the catacombs. We're crawling underneath the floor of the first floor units. And that's the same podium slab that we're talking about, but there's no dirt in here. It's concrete. So when you look down and you see that it's rusting, and you can actually see the bars, that's not a good sign. And in this particular location, his report says that the reinforcing steel is severely corroded. So with that, I'm going to pause for just a minute and say, well, what are we doing about the current condition, and why did we put shoring in there, and what are we trying to accomplish as that relates? Because that's sort of the first increment of this discussion. So Jeremy, if you wouldn't mind, maybe I'll come on up and I'll interview you a little bit. So you guys went up and you saw this kind of corrosion and you saw the concrete spalling, and what kind of an analysis did you go from there? What did you do beyond that?
Yeah, sure. So I'd like to use the analogy sometimes of, when you go to the doctor's office, you typically go in and they'll do a physical, right? And they look you over, they maybe have you do a jumping jack or stretch. And based on that physical examination, they may see something that concerns them and they may want to have blood work done. They may want to have an X-ray done. You don't go straight to the MRI machine, right? So I did an initial phase 1 investigation where I spent about 8 hours within those catacomb spaces, crawling all through that area, and saw enough areas of deterioration that I recommended to the board that a more detailed investigation be performed. So it was kind of the phase 1 was kind of like the physical examination. I then did a phase 2 examination where we had a testing lab take samples and remove some areas of the concrete so we could physically observe the reinforcement in different areas of that podium slab. And the results of those examinations identified that there are some areas where there is deterioration of the reinforcement occurring. And it's of such extent that we felt like it would be prudent to recommend some temporary shoring be installed so that we could further investigate the matter. After we performed that additional investigation, we've recommended that some repairs be implemented of that podium slab in strategic areas.
Okay, and your report categorizes the conditions in terms of high priority, medium priority, low priority. And it appears to me that from what we've talked about, you've given a contract to the association to design repairs and then get them bid and have those repairs affected at the project. Can you generally describe what those repairs would consist of?
Sure. So most of the repairs are actually kind of hidden within that catacomb space on the top side of the podium deck. Some of those repairs will essentially involve removing the loose and unsound concrete, cleaning up the reinforcement bar to remove the corrosion off of it. And then in some cases, you will be adding some additional reinforcement and actually kind of an additional topping slab on top of that podium element. So essentially, it's in some areas, it's just remove the bad concrete, clean up the bar and patch back with new repair concrete. In other areas, we're actually making the podium slab a little thicker. And you'll never see that because it's within the catacomb spaces.
Last question, what caused the condition that we're dealing with?
Yeah, so there's always a few elements that come together that will cause corrosion, but ultimately it's going to be a combination of moisture. Also, as part of our phase 2 investigation, we had concrete chemical testing done, and there was high levels of chlorides found, and that's not surprising because of how close you are to the coast. But as you all know, salts can really accelerate corrosion. So the fact that there's moisture that's getting into those catacomb spaces, many times when I was down there, you could see little puddles and pools of water. And I think Doug will talk more about the sources of some of that water. That wasn't the scope of my investigation, but we recommend that, yes, the structural repairs be done, but the structural deterioration is essentially caused by the moisture that's essentially getting into that concrete. And so we recommend that Doug and his team look at maybe some waterproofing repairs or recommendations to mitigate additional water from getting into the slab.
Great, thank you. So Jeremy's team recommended an investigation related to water getting into the concrete. And our firm was retained to do that investigation. We had already worked on the windows and were refining the window design, but concurrent with that, we embarked on investigating the water intrusion that was causing the problems. So our presentation at this point will then focus on some of those findings. We can go to the next slide. Next one, please. Those are still Jeremy's. Okay, so fortunately, we worked on this long enough that it rained really well. Up until, I don't know, up until October or so, we were just looking at stains and little damp areas, and then it rained. So yes, the perimeter walls are leaking significantly, and it's not localized to a certain area. I wouldn't say it's 100%, but we're pushing over 90% of the walls seem to have some sort of leakage on them. So here's a photograph of the water that's coming through the wall and is collecting inside the crawl space. Next slide. Here's another example of the same kind of thing. Next slide. More of the same. So when Jeremy was talking about water being a source, if you bring in salt-laden air or water into this area and then it just sits on the concrete, it gets a chance to cause the kind of corrosion issues and affect the concrete. And honestly, I think people that have built in construction long enough know that when you do concrete close to the coast, you sort of have to keep an eye on it because that's sort of a phenomenon that does happen. So you need to be careful with that. Next slide. More of the same, rainwater coming in, and often it's at the base of the wall, but you can see on the right-hand arrow, sometimes it's higher than that. It's coming in at higher levels. I would say at least a third of the time it's higher than just the base of the wall. Next, please. This is an area such as we would have seen before the rainfall, where we just had significant amount of staining from past leaks without the water actually showing up there. That's the result of years of this kind of leakage happening. Next, please. And in some areas, the association has made repairs in the past. It's difficult to try to repair a wall from the inside and have it be a good long-term fix. And this photograph shows that. The dashed line is a cementitious coating that's been placed on the inside of the wall. It has compounds in it that are water seeking. And so the theory is that if water runs through these walls, this compound, the chemicals in it will seek that water and fill the pores. But unfortunately, in concrete masonry, there's a gazillion pores. And so filling all of those and making it always watertight is really difficult to do after the fact. So this shows those stains. We have water coming through in an area where one of the repairs was attempted. Next, please. As Jeremy mentioned to me in advance, he said, yeah, even some of your slides show some of this corrosion. So here's a photograph in a leaking area where we saw the steel reinforcing exposed and corroding. Next, please. Sometimes we sort of scratch our head when we see some of the repairs that have been attempted. We're not really sure what the black bituminous material is, especially since it's only applied at the floor level and not really up onto the walls. But suffice it to say, the blue arrows there show that there's water coming in where a past attempt was made to repair. Next, please. We talked earlier in the garage about what I called efflorescence, which is a white calcium deposit. This photograph shows the white calcium deposit on the backside of the wall. That wall has been waterproofed previously with that same kind of cementitious coating. You can see, you don't really see the block joints up there. You just see a flat wall. That's because it's got a coating over it. And this is in the same proximity as the last photograph. So it also has that black bituminous repair attempt at the base and moisture seeping through the wall and at the base of the wall. Next, please. So it would be a challenge if it was only the walls that we were talking about in terms of water intrusion, but there are other factors that also need to be addressed. And one of the factors is the plumbing systems that are below the units. If I were to just sort of simplify, there's three kinds of plumbing systems that are at issue. One is the storm drain lines. Those are the lines that take the water off the roof, maybe in some places off some of the balconies, runs it down and takes it out to the storm sewer outside. So it comes to this hollow space and then it runs to the exterior. The second one are waste lines. That's all the stuff that comes out of your sinks and your toilets and your bathtubs and goes to the sanitary sewer. And that is the second area. And every unit has 2 or 3 or 4 stacks, depending on where the plumbing fixtures are grouped. And by a stack, I mean, there's you, and then there's neighbor above, and your neighbor above, and your neighbor above. And so all of those line up and all that piping comes down and goes down and into this crawl space. And then the third is water supply. So you got roof water, you got wastewater, and now you got the clean water that is getting supplied to the units. All of those systems are leaking and leaking pretty good. And so we'll show you, next slide, please. So in some cases, it's just a difficult thing to do right, to run that storm drain that's at the top of the concrete through the exterior wall where the waterproofing is. We are getting waterproofing through the wall at penetrations. They just have to be detailed correctly. Next, please. But we also have places where new pipes for repairs were brought in and touching old pipes. In fact, they were connected to old pipes that have holes in them. So the photograph on the right there shows a deteriorated pipe to where you could actually see inside the pipe. On the left-hand side, that is a different type of a storm drain line that is coming across and needed to connect to that connector, but there wasn't enough room for that to happen. And so it was just loose laid into there. So anytime the water gets to that point, it's not making it outside, it's coming back inside the catacomb. Next. And so besides the age and condition of the pipes, there's also a problem with the support for the pipes. And this goes all the way back to initial construction. This isn't, somebody jerry-rigging it along the way. This is the way it was left. There are concrete blocks that are stacked up, loose, not cemented to each other, with blocks of wood that are holding up things that if you bump it, that takes the support away from the piping. So any workman that's down there has a chance to dislodge pipes. And every time that happens, you're basically putting stress on, you have a real long line of pipe, then all of a sudden now you have stress on those connection points. So in this particular slide, although it's not a close-up, that arrow on the right-hand side towards the back is a leak location in one of the pipes that happens in vicinity to this poorly supported. Now, actually, just so you know, in the foreground, there's actually a proper pipe support there. So for that water line there, you can see a banded support that supports it up and keeps it. And you'd like to see a lot more of that happening, or supporting it from the ceiling of the catacomb in a similar way. Next slide. This is a photograph of a connector that was a repair job, and the way it is slipped together, it's leaking today. So a past repair is also leaking. Next. So we talked about water getting in. How does that water get in past those walls? Well, the exterior of the walls has a waterproof coating on it. It's 50 years old. It's old technology and it's worn out. This particular photograph on the right-hand side, if you were to look at it closely, the lighter gray area is actually the fiberglass reinforcing that was put in with a cold applied bitumen, basically mastic-like material in multiple layers. And over the years, it's just worn away, so to where you have no waterproofing in areas like that. Well, when we dug our test pits, we found that it didn't just happen above ground, it also happened below ground. So there's been a migration of that bitumen. It's no longer consistently applied, and water is getting through the waterproof membrane. And this is on the walls. So whenever we've talked about walls, this is the waterproofing system. I think that's Kirsten's hand holding a piece of the waterproofing inside one of the test pits. And it just shows that there isn't a good coverage. If you can see the mesh, that's not good coverage. And then in addition to that, which you're not going to see where you're sitting, there are plant roots that have woven themselves into this membrane. It wasn't a great membrane in the first place. And over 50 years, plant roots look for water sources. So if they find a water source, they grow in those directions. And then it starts to dislodge the membrane from the wall even more than it was already. So we have an issue with the waterproofing itself, its age, it's worn out, but also with the fact that there are plant roots, tree roots that have grown into the membrane. If we can go to the next slide, please. This photograph on the right gives you a lot bigger picture of some of those roots. We're not talking tiny little things. You can see the pry bar that's there next to the tape measure on the right-hand photograph. Those are roots in that membrane system. Then again, Kirsten's holding a piece of the membrane. That particular membrane is actually a horizontal membrane, which we haven't talked about yet, but that's the horizontal membrane, and it also has roots growing in it. Next. So in general, there's a waterproofing on the outside of the garage. Honestly, it seems to be performing pretty well. We haven't seen a lot of leaks through that. One of the saving graces is that the perimeter walls are not concrete masonry, they're poured in place concrete. That tends to have it's not waterproof in and of itself, but the density of the material and how it's placed is much more, keeps the water from allowing it to get in, keeps it out. But you also have waterproofing on top of the garage. There are areas where the landscape goes over the garage, and we have water coming through that membrane and into the garage. Then also we have water that goes into the crawl space from the walls, which we've spent a lot of time looking at photographs of. It gets into the crawl space, but then it also, because once it gets in the crawl space, there's no waterproofing. So it wants to find cracks and find its way down in. And of course, you put enough water up there and you just let it pond and there's nothing that causes it to evaporate, it eventually finds its way into the garage. Next, please. So based on our evaluation, our recommendation is that the waterproofing system at Bay Scene be removed and replaced. We've attempted to look at the extent to try to limit that. And I think initially we were hopeful that we wouldn't have to excavate around the whole perimeter of all the buildings. But after we looked at our second round of information after rainfall, I concluded that it needs to go around all the buildings because 90% of them are showing water intrusion. Then what about the horizontal part? In a very generalized sense, where the yellow is the horizontal membrane that needs to be repaired. We could probably dice it a little more finely, but it's kind of a means and methods of construction thing. Say between towers 3 and 4, we might be able to just trench closer, but then we would have this little tiny area that we hadn't waterproofed. It just didn't seem smart at that point to not go ahead when you know that the waterproofing is defective and is leaking elsewhere, to go ahead and do that. So we've tried to be as efficient as we can. And one of the things that we do is we use a very high performance waterproofing. We specify a high performance waterproofing for use on jobs like this. And it's great. It's not going to allow tree roots to get into it. We also put protection over it just to help that. We put drainage facilities on top of that to keep water away from it. So we have a lot of belt and suspenders happening in the waterproofing repair. One of the other good things about that membrane, though, is it 95 out of 100 times seals well to an old membrane. So that doesn't make the old membrane good, but if you're trying to limit the repair extent, you have the ability to pick a line, let's say, and say, okay, it's leaking here. We don't have evidence over here. We're going to take our waterproofing out to that point. And purely because we understand this is a very expensive proposition, that's why you see the yellow the way you did. Why you don't see a big yellow L all the way. It's our intent to try to lessen the extent and make the repairs as simple as possible, so that if you have repairs outside of that yellow area in the future, you'll know what you've repaired and you know where to go to repair more. So again, it's a limited area, even though there's a lot of it. It's not the whole lid. It's a good portion of it. It's mostly up against the buildings, and there are some larger areas, as I just said. Are we through with this part of the slides, Jeff? Next, please. Yeah, we kind of are. I'm going to run through one other subject. I didn't have any place else to put this. But as part of Jeremy's investigation, while we were looking at this, we did come aware that the edges of some of the balconies are failing. And by that, it's the same phenomena that Jeremy was concerned about with regard to salts getting in and causing corrosion into the concrete, to the point where some of the outer edges of the balconies have fallen off. Now, most of the ones, in fact, I think all that we've seen where it's fallen are the ones that are real close to the ground, like maybe in the past they got hit by a lot of irrigation water and things. So they're probably worse there. But there are other areas on the buildings that are showing signs of the same thing happening. And they're at like the third or the fourth story. So the last thing you want to have happen is one of those chunks fall off and hit somebody. So Jeremy did do an investigation of the balconies. He has in his report the similar kind of priorities between high, medium, and low. And later on, when we talk about costs, the scope of this project is really just the high and the medium ones. We're not saying 100% at this point in time. We will have a prototype repair that if in the future more of this begins to happen, it could be applied to the other decks that aren't part of this repair. But if we can go back to the slides, I'd like to just show you, this is a balcony edge. Obviously, it's close to the ground. You can see the plants in the foreground. You can see that the reinforcing steel is very, very corroded. And you can see that a good portion of that concrete has just fallen off the edge. So this is just an introductory couple of slides. I'm not going to go into it in a great deal. It's a very small part of the costs that we're going to be presenting today. Next slide, please. But I did mention to you that there are areas where similar things seem to be happening higher up on the building. And this is a good example where this is, we're looking at like a 5th floor unit, I think, based on that photo on the left. That's of the same unit. And if you look on the right, you can see a close-up of the crack. So it's the same kind of areas that are getting deteriorated and will need to be addressed. But again, it's not 100%, but I did just want you to be familiar with that. Okay, what's next on the slide? Do we have any more? Okay, but no, we're not going to take an intermission. What we're going to do is we're going to take questions. And I'll try to answer them as best I can. And if some of the consultants or our team needs to chime in, I'll have them do that too. Yeah. Okay, so
Hello? Can you hear me? Yeah.
there you go.
First, thank you everyone for such a comprehensive opening. My name is Dennis Alters. I'm a homeowner with my wife. Forgive the voice. I have a few questions. First, what is the estimated danger? We're talking about Surfside, Florida. So what's the estimate of something like that happening here?
Well, I think we're trying to avoid that happening. That's why the shoring went in
Understood.
to do that. I'm not sure I know how to estimate danger other than it seems when we say severe or significant, that's a cause for concern. I don't know how else to characterize it. Or is there a better way to characterize it, Jeremy?
I appreciate that. I'm taking this very seriously, frankly. In addition to the water sources that you mentioned, like rain, what about the irrigation to the foliage around the building? Is that a problem?
Well, at least on the exterior portion facing the street, the association has done quite a bit of regrading and re-landscaping over the years to try to minimize the use of irrigation. I think to some degree irrigation is part of it. And of course, to get to the waterproofing, it has to come out and you have to create something new. And I know one of the charges that the board has left us with in going forward is we don't want to go back with the same kind of landscaping that is high water use. We need to minimize that. But in terms of contributing, I suppose you're probably right. In some ways it contributes, but I will say we were in the underfloor spaces in the summertime and we saw a little dampness here and there, but man, when it rained, we saw it.
About mold?
We haven't seen evidence in the crawl spaces of mold. Kirsten, have we? Yeah.
I was very impressed with a comment that you made about the issues of using concrete in this particular vicinity. Are there newer building materials that would be used in the repair that you might be proposing in addition to the waterproofing?
I think
This isn't my field. I don't know the technology.
Yeah, I should let Jeremy answer this, but there are improvements that can be made to the concrete mix where you do that. However, most of what we're talking about is leaving the existing materials in place. If we were to discover other structural problems like Jeremy's firm has already identified, then they would get similar kinds of repairs. But I don't see us taking out any podium decks at this point in time and replacing them.
This is my last question, I promise, regarding the plumbing issues. If these conduits, the pipes, are leaking into the crawl space, then what about the vertical damage throughout the building and the walls?
Yeah, so my firm personally hasn't investigated that, but I'll tell you that I've talked to the board at length about this. And it has been a problem, and it is a recurring problem that needs to be addressed. And in addition to that, whenever somebody asks for a big renovation, they also have been of a mind to have the piping replaced in the walls at that point in time, which on other projects that we've worked on similar to this, that's kind of what we've seen in other places as well. So I think you try to address it when you can. You know that you are going to get leaks in the stacks along the way. And because it usually happens in proximity to somebody else's unit, it usually gets addressed right away because you don't want it leaking into somebody else's unit, nor yours. And, but I think for the most part, the leaks in the underfloor space are related to the connections once it comes through the lowest deck, and then it turns, and then it gets poorly supported and on its way out.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Okay, yes, sir.
Good morning. Thank you for the professional explanation. The first question is, I'm trying to understand the measure of emergency of the situation. So if you can explain us or share us in terms of speed, how quickly it's advancing these damages? Because I would like to translate afterwards in financial influx, because.
Sure.
Mhm.
Sure. I think it's actually almost the same question that was asked earlier in terms of how dangerous is the current situation. I think once you're aware of the condition and you see the factors, if you were to turn and not do anything about it, you'd be negligent. And I would have a difficult time standing up in front of you saying, hey, I don't think it's any big deal. Don't worry about it, because we have the evidence in front of us. And one of the things that if you were to look at Jeremy's report, the testing lab that they had come out did exhaustive studies of the areas. So they know what they're talking about in terms of what the concrete condition is and what the rebar condition is. So, you know, I'm not sure how else to respond. And I'm not here to hype things either. So I think you just, when somebody advises you that you have a problem and that it could lead to a collapse, I think you need to take action.
No, of course, but the point here is, because I'm going to the next question. In your opinion, or what's your plan to start? We need to start with at the same time with all the units, or we can start one unit and then the other ones. That because everything is financial influx. That's why I'm not trying just to avoid a problem.
Right.
I'm just trying to understand if we can make like a financial plan for everything at the same time, or we can start one building, two buildings. That's my point.
Well, I think that those are really good questions. You've been thinking about it. It's obvious, but I think the issues that are going to be presented today have been looked at as a combined project, which is going to add up to a whole lot of money. But the point to that is it's actually most effective cost-wise to deal with it all at once. Now, when you say all at once, we don't show up on Monday and we're done with the whole job on Friday. It takes a lot of time to do this, and it is best done in sequences. And so there are sequences related to that, but it's an association problem. It's not an individual owner's problem. And in fact, everything that we've talked about for the most part is all association stuff. Even if you're thinking about the balconies that we talked about.
No, I know that, but we need to be based to take a decision. We need to take, and we need to understand a technical matter first, just to decide afterwards. So that's why it's my question.
Yes, yes. I think, you know, and I guess simply stated, it's an association problem. I think that all the conditions at issue are association related things that need to be repaired, and there will be kind of a global plan in terms of how that gets affected. And that global plan is made up of not a lot, but quite a few pieces.
Let me make the question again, because I really need to understand this point. do you need to make the intervention all at the same time or not?
Our recommendation, not
Mhm.
our need, but our recommendation is that the project be handled as a combined project. And it will not all happen as one big project. It will happen in a process as proposed. If for some reason it was to be accomplished in various different projects, it would probably end up being more expensive. So far, we haven't contemplated breaking it into pieces. But by saying we haven't thought about doing it into pieces doesn't mean we haven't talked about a sequence and phases.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not sure I totally answered your question, but we can talk more. Any more? Yes, sir.
My name's Alan Rothman. I'm in 442. A question about timing. So from start to finish, once let's say this is approved and we say, let's go ahead and do it and do the windows as well. How long of a time period from start to finish should we anticipate that our community is going to be under construction?
Well, there's two parts to it. We have to do drawings and specs for repairs and get them permitted with the city and that sort of stuff. And I'm not sure what we put out on that, Jeff. Is it like around 6 to 9 months or something like that? And then Robbie from Nautilus can talk to you about the time for the construction. So Robbie, we'll go ahead and chat about it. Come on. Robbie Hauser from Nautilus.
So we put together a comprehensive preliminary construction schedule. And if we were to do both the curtain wall project and the waterproofing project concurrently, it would take us approximately 18 months from start to finish of construction. That would be phasing through the property, initially working, we just took tower 1 and 2 as like the starting point, and then would phase through the property to tower 3 and 4, after which the sequence and methodology was we would work our way around tower 1 and 2 first with the curtain wall replacement, then tower 3 and 4 with the curtain wall replacement. And while tower 3 and 4 were working on the curtain wall, we're doing the waterproofing at tower 1 and 2, and then the waterproofing at tower 3 and 4. And the reason why we would do the waterproofing after the curtain wall is because with the replacement of the curtain wall system, there's waterproofing integrations at the bottom of the system that have to happen after you've replaced the curtain wall assembly. So that was the thought process and the methodology with that concept.
Thank you. Another question I have is these gorgeous, massive Torrey pines that we have. By Tower 4, it looks like the part of the Torrey pine is over the garage. Most of it is not, but some of it is. So would this entail removing the Torrey pines as well?
That's not the intention at this time. The waterproofing extent of the repair is actually closer to the buildings than it is underneath that tree, either tree. So
The weight of those trees creating a problem for the podium or creating a problem in the community?
we didn't evaluate that. So
Not that we've seen. The root ball is definitely outside of the garage. Or outside of the garage. That's not to say there isn't a root or two that's not to say that there isn't a root or 2 or 3 or 5 above the garage here or there.
Rod Niebuhr, number 354. If we vote yes and we do this waterproofing, the new waterproofing system, how long could we expect that to last, this new fix and the new materials and stuff that are available today?
Well, I think it's a lifelong solution. people don't warrant lifelong solutions in construction. So, we would probably be looking at, say, a 10 to 20-year warranty, but I think that you should get positive solution for the next 50 years for sure.
Thank you, and thank you very much for your excellent presentation.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Bill Peach in 112. I'd like to just refer back to your Nautilus. What's your proposed access point right now? I looked at the estimate, and one was to lift some cranes over into the interior. And then I don't know if that's still what you, or
That,
bringing it through the lobby.
so when you're facing the entry to the lobby, we actually took a new approach of opening a section between the lobby structure and Tower 2. And that would be our main access point. We're no longer doing a crane of equipment over top.
Okay.
There will be times when we're having to pull in larger steel structures to support the curtain wall, the new curtain wall assembly. But all of that, we're going to be operating through the actual property through that access point. So
Yeah, this is going to be a monster construction wise.
it's going to take a lot of coordination.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's going, and because the way I was looking at it, I thought maybe also off Tower 1 on the side there on the, what would that be, the south
South.
side?
Yep.
You might be able to pull in equipment through there. But-
We looked at that as well. We felt like there was more space wise between the lobby and Tower 2 as like a main focal point. Not to say that that will be the only focal point. We will be moving through the property and there will be areas where we will be set up elsewhere. But to control crew traffic on a daily basis, we try to limit that to one access point, and that seemed more central on the property.
Okay. So you're gonna wipe out most everything up against the buildings and in those yellow areas in between the towers itself.
That's correct. A lot of,
So you're talking about ton of soil that you're gonna have to be moving around. Where are you
Yes,
gonna
sir.
stockpile?
so actually right now we're exporting and importing because of the limited space. So
That's, I've been in construction for 50 years, so
yeah,
I see the dilemmas you're gonna be into. You're gonna have to take out a lot of hardscape,
correct.
and which brings up the concerns of ADA. Has the consultant team discussed any of this with the city of San Diego permitting departments yet?
Not yet,
And
no, but we have identified that criteria.
I mean, that should have been one of your first things you did, is once you realized what the scope of this project is. Because, I mean, we've got access issues all over this place, and we start pulling up sidewalks. You could run into some problems with the city.
Well, I'm not sure of that because we talked to our attorney about that and we asked him, is this going to raise ADA issues? Bob and I were there and he says, you are not open to the public. If you were open to the public or you had things for the public, it's a concern. But the fact that we are a private condominium, he said that will not be a concern for us. However, we will probably be losing our sidewalks between the towers, right?
Yeah,
It's an opportunity at that time. We have enough grading and all to get rid of all the steps. We can grade right. We could even take a pathway to the, right above the, where the clock is at the pool and get kind of a lift down there. So when everything's torn up like that, we have an opportunity to make things a lot better, new lighting, all that stuff. We will not bring it back to just what we have today. We want to bring it back to the 21st century and make it a real, make, those have not been worked out yet. We found the real major problems. The next step would be eventually we just to get a landscape architect to help us come to terms with all that, look at the ADA issues and all, where we can get rid of steps, nice lighting, new irrigation, all new 21st century, not the hodgepodge stuff we've been doing for so long.
and none of that's in the program right now.
There's cost set aside for that.
Well,
We-
I saw $90,000 in
We-
the
we-
the rough order of magnitude estimates and.
Oh, which one did you see then? Which one?
It was either out of the architects or out of the.
Well,
structure-
we just got revised cost estimates 2 days ago, okay? So you don't have the latest cost estimates. So 2 days ago, they got them, and we just got them in time. When these guys are finished, I'll be talking about costs, but they're just as 2 days old.
Well, no, I appreciate it. I mean, the team is doing a great job. I have no complaints. I'm glad you finally got a series of professionals on board to do this. But,
No, we
It's
recognize,
a learning process. It
right,
really is.
it's and this has evolved. I mean, this was not something we've known for a long time, it's just more and more. So and that's why we had to delay the, special assessment vote, because we didn't have all the facts yet.
You still don't.
We still don't, but we have enough. We have enough to at least move forward, but we will continue.
Thank you.
Thank you. Suffice it to say, we have asked Nautilus to set aside funds in the estimate for ADA improvements as well as landscaping, which obviously we know we need to make through that. And, I think there's definitely that need, because every time we do a reconstruction project, it happens that we need to deal with ADA, period. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
We're in Tower 2. I just wanted to check to see, will all the units be habitable during this entire process, or?
I think that's the plan. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Just to understand broadly the limitations during the jobs, the parking will be closed, and for example, or will be open, the parking area
I think the parking garage will be open.
will be open.
Yes.
The entrance or any limitation that we shall know or you already have been identified?
Well, for instance, we're taking up all of the hardscape out on the other side of the lobby that's there. And thinking of ADA, you walk into the lobby, there's 3 steps down immediately. So that has to get worked out. But when you come out of the lobby where the fountains are and the walkways, that's going to all need to get demolished. So to get to your unit, obviously there'll have to be some sort of temporary means of getting you safely to and from the front door, or to and from. I think if you get into the garage, you're probably home free because you can get to the elevators and get up to your unit.
Any problem with the use of water use?
I'm sorry?
Any problem or any limitations during the job to use water?
Water usage?
Water, yes.
Well, I'd like to say this is going to be perfect and nothing will ever go wrong, but it probably will happen on occasion. But for the most part, the plan is no, you'll have water service, you'll have sewer.
So we can still live in.
Yes.
That's amazing.
That's the intention. Yes,
Okay,
sir.
perfect. Thank you.
Just a clarification. So when you go into the catacombs, will you be replacing all the piping that's in the catacombs as well?
That's what we've allowed for right now in the, yes. Yes, sir. we'll kind of make this the last question, and then we want to take a break for a bit. Okay, we'll answer a question first.
Jake Woodson, Tower 4. I just want to get a bit more complete picture on the time frame. So before we got the answer about 18 months for construction, somebody had mentioned something about plans and permits and things beforehand. So that's obviously in addition. So I guess, what is the total amount of time from start to finish? So 18 months plus what?
In ballpark terms, 6 to 9 months added to that in advance. And so we can certainly, let's say we get approval on the windows first, do that. We don't necessarily have to get permits for the combined project. So we could get started on those sooner, which I think is everybody's hope for, to, try to not wait a whole other 9 months, but get there as soon as possible. But I think to be safe, you'd want to say 6 to 9 months for plans and specs and permitting and.
Okay, so you're saying they'll total up to 27 months total.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am?
Is the vote going to be like one vote or 3 votes? Okay.
I think that's what the end portion of the meeting will be about. Will be about that. Okay. If we could, then Jim, let's cue up the curtain wall portion of the project, or whatever was after that intermission slide. Okay, we can go to yeah, that's fine. So again, just as a reminder, we're talking curtain walls, and we're talking these 5-story assemblies of windows that all come together and are supported on the face of the building. And why is it a curtain wall and why isn't it a window wall? So just simply stated, if you could kind of think about curtains being hung, this assembly, this 5-story assembly, is hung off the side of your building. Now, different than curtains per se, it's not only hung at the top, it's hung on the facade down the face of the building. And our design actually will have a few key points of connection to support it, but that is the curtain wall. A window wall system, which we discussed a year ago when we had a similar meeting, would be just fit between the concrete slab of one unit and the concrete slab of the next unit. So if we could, in terms of that, if you stopped and thought about it, where does that curtain wall go? Well, it might go where your blinds are right now. It might have to come into the building. And so at first we were a little reluctant to do that. And we're thinking about some other ways that ended up seemed extraordinarily costly. But then as we actually started bidding this project, so by the way, when you see these costs, they're not just Robbie in the office figuring out some costs. He's actually gone to subcontractors. His team has gone to subcontractors and gotten real costs for real product to install. So anyways, long story short, as we looked at the window walls, they were more expensive. So we haven't spent any time looking at window walls. We're only looking at a curtain wall solution now. We also have looked at other various manufacturers and other qualified window installers so that we're not just beholden to one. We're sort of checking these things out. But we think that the pricing, albeit high, is pretty good given the situation that we're in. So anyway, Curtain walls, you saw that on the photograph. We go to the next slide, and I think this is a visual simulation. We had this last year, but it will give you a good picture of, here are the existing awning windows in your units. You can kind of see how the existing setup is. The awnings project out. And then from the inside, you know, they open out. Then in the proposed solution, instead of having awning windows at the floor, there would be what are called casement windows, which are swinging windows. And they are accessed above that middle bar that's there. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. So from the inside, you all know what it looks like, but this is one of the units that has louvers. Some people have designed their their window coverings to fit with the module that's there. So not that that is the only reason you would do something, but it's one reason we've kind of tried to stay with the existing design. We also have been concerned about the city's impact that pretty much any project over the 35 years, Kirsten, 40 years, now has to go through a historic resource review. And I'll tell you, sometimes it's the silliest thing ever when you're working on a little dingbat house that you have to go show them pictures of what this looked like. But nevertheless, they're going to ask for that on your project because it is of that age, and we will have to you know, let them review and determine whether Bay Scene is an historic resource. So the more that the design looks like the existing, the less of an impact that you're going to have, the less of a chance of getting a pushback from the city there. And we have actually proposed and probably will do a preliminary review with the city. We may well, based on your recommendation, but also I've been thinking the same thing, talk to them as a preliminary review before we go too much farther on the ADA applicability to the site before we go too much farther. Okay, next slide. Here's the outside of the same that we just took a look at. So again, we're not talking about the sliding glass doors. I don't mean to beat a dead horse, but we're talking about the 5 stories of window. Next slide. So there are a variety of conditions at Bay Scene that have led to the, you know, our conclusion that the system is worn out. Starting at the base of the building, there are plenty of locations that over the years have been allowed to be into the ground, and there are places where the ground has sloped back to the building. And so it's deteriorated the aluminum. Next, please. In some cases, significantly. The sill can at the bottom of the unit of the curtain wall is very deteriorated in some locations as a result of that. Next, please. More of the same, but that's the kind of corrosion that we've seen at various places across the project. You can actually, we didn't point to every single one of them, but there's some even behind those arrows. What are the other kinds of corrosion that's happening, which is more just kind of showing the age of the building, is this oxidation that's happening? Window manufacturers these days are advising and not warranting anodized aluminum finishes in a maritime environment. And so these were anodized aluminum mullions, and so they're starting to, they have oxidized over the year, which is why the blue arrow on the right is showing the white look to the what was bronze at one point in time. Next. There's a close-up of that phenomena occurring towards the base of the building. Next. There's also quite a bit of pitting that's happening, another type of corrosion that happens. So I think as you get this salt-laden moisture, not always rain, sometimes it's just very moist air, and you get condensation that happens on your metal. It collects and over time begins to corrode the metal. So We have, that happens pretty frequently. Next, please. There's another view of the same kind of thing. The one on the right is at the top, and then you can see the one on the left is also showing pitting even on the vertical members. Next. Moving into the window system itself, there are effectively rubber gaskets that the windows that fit into and keep water from coming in and air from coming in. Well, those gaskets are 50 years old and they're not working anymore. They've kind of spent their useful life and they need to be replaced. Next. And, I think as we went through this, one of the best things that I think we've done so far is the homeowner survey. And we applaud you for being so good at responding and giving us your input. This one, actually, we quoted 21% of the windows, homeowners are saying that their windows are experiencing leakage. Here's a couple of photos, same window system, different window location. This particular owner, 2 or 3 times a year when it rains, has to pull their carpet back and dry it out because they get so much leakage into their unit. So repairs have been implemented over the years. When you have this sort of integrated curtain wall system that all goes together, you're sort of left with what pieces can we take out and put back? Those could be replaced or repaired. But then the rest of the units that stay in place, how do you do that? And the sort of go-to solution is we're going to apply sealant to the outside of these things. And that's happened a lot at Bay Scene. So while we're only talking about 21% of the units having leakage today, there's a whole lot more than 21% of the units that have evidence of this kind of sealant repair over the exterior of their wood curtain wall. So they're not all as bad as that particular bad job was done there, but you get 2 different kinds of things that are failing here. You get sealant joints that are cracked and open, and you also get the gaskets that are also failing, and to the point where the hardware also is corroded. So now the windows don't close all the way. You can see that happening at the top there. And I am not, I think this will be posted, right? This presentation will be posted. Our presentation will be posted on the website at some point in time. So just for your information, we have a lot of quotations that I'm not reading to you right now. We're kind of walking right by them, but as an example, the last one said, the windows are warped and will not fully close. Seals around the operating windows are completely shot. And another one said, every winter we must tape the edges of our operable windows to seal out cold drafts. And those are just a little speck of the kinds of comments that we have received. Okay, so then where the sealant repairs have been affected, they are not working, so they are failing. This particular sealant just must have been the wrong one or been an incompatible material because it's just oozing out of the joint that it was placed into. Next, please. And there's been a considerable amount of effort to try to keep water out. Unfortunately, in some places, it's a little bit misguided. At the bottom right-hand photograph, that sealant that's been applied there is actually where the water drains out of the unit. So by putting the sealant there, somebody's actually created a dam that forces water to stay inside the aluminum system. Next, please. More of the same kind of thing. Next, please. This particular quote says, can't shut one of the bedroom windows. It's opened about an inch. Cold air flows into bedroom unless I block it with pillows. And then this particular set of photographs, again, is just showing some of the sealant joints that are failing and pulling out. Next, please. So there are other areas of the curtain wall assembly, especially where you have these 135-degree angles. They kind of go around the corner, and they got a 45 coming into a flat plane. So you have these filler pieces, and those filler pieces are also open and leaking. Please. Unfortunately, the original construction, the stucco that's on the wall, or the plaster, cement plaster, was so thick that it came onto the aluminum. And two things have happened over time. Because there's no lath at that extra thick, the stucco is cracked off and left openings. But in addition, we also have areas where you've got now this cement matrix that's getting wet, and it's in touch with the aluminum. So it's corroded the aluminum in certain areas a pretty good amount. Next, please. In fact, I think on that last one, you could actually see, but this is a good one. These are good. They'll show you the corroding areas where the stucco has been in contact with the metal. Next, please. Yeah, this is a great one. This shows you the amount of corrosion that's happened now. To be honest, we cleaned that joint out a little bit before we took the photograph, but nevertheless, you can see the amount of corrosion that's there. So some folks have said, I've had enough. I'm going to just go ahead and replace my own windows within the curtain wall system. And that's had varying success. Some people have been happy with that. Others have found that the existing structure doesn't seem to support those new windows very well, so they have a problem with it binding and racking and things like that. There haven't been that many replacements across the project, but when we've consulted with Jeremy, and one of the things we thought about early on is, can we just keep these verticals that are there and put a new system into them? Wouldn't that be better? And he said, well, unfortunately, if you're putting in double glazing, it's heavier, and the connection points that we have don't really facilitate supporting a full 5 stories of double glazed windows in an assembly like this. So the long and the short is no, you can't do that. We can't just keep doing more of the same. These next couple pictures are just to show you the menagerie of the kinds of looks that you're getting on the buildings, because some people do have those casement windows now instead of the awnings. Other people have installed a slider, and some people have replaced their awnings, but they don't look like the other awnings. So it's getting a little bit of a menagerie there. Next, please. The association originally had hoped that they could use a specific vendor who had worked with them and provided some preliminary pricing on this project that we're dealing with, and suggested putting in a sort of a prototype, if you will, system of windows. So this is the hallway on, I think it's Tower 3, and it was done in vinyl and not in aluminum. So one of the downsides of vinyl is it's heavier. There have been some concerns about the code effectiveness of this, and we just haven't spent the time working on that, because this is kind of a one-off. There isn't any other corridors that have this kind of condition on it. It wouldn't really impact it. But the heaviness was a factor, and the fact that this had to be done as a window wall, which means, again, we'd have to push everything back in. So the heaviness and taking real estate away from everybody's unit kept us from pursuing this as a solution. And by the time this contractor got done and gave revised prices, they had pretty much doubled or tripled after doing the one. They'd gone way up. The photo on the right is just showing some loose elements in that of how the facing is not even tight there. Not a great solution. Next, please. We all know about the awning windows, but the problem at Bay Scene is awning windows is the only way of ventilating the window system, and they're at the floor level. And so that's a hazard. If you were to try to design a building with awning windows here, you couldn't do it unless you had limiters, which wouldn't allow you to open them all the way. You'd have to restrict how much you could use those ventilating units. It's a hazard if you have pets. It's a definitely hazard if you have grandkids that crawl around on the floor. And if you've decided, or if your old screen isn't working very well or doesn't fit and it's not there, not that I would ever advocate that a screen is a safety feature. It's not. But you have no impediment. Next, please. It kind of shows you the handle and the screen as provided. Next, please. And, some folks have addressed this by putting in their own sort of grill with the handle that's there. And, also been installed in varying ways. One, you can see the one on the right is done with a wood frame, and then the one up above on the left appears to have been done with metal. Next, please. Corrosion is also beginning to beset the curtain wall system itself. So this just is examples of the corrosion on some of the hardware. Next, please. Some of that corrosion has led to failure. So you can see the window on the right isn't actually working properly. It's out of plumb, it's tweaked. Next, please. I mentioned how the 135-degree angles work and that there are openings in here. You can see these vertical joints have been repaired, but nevertheless, the sealant joint continues to break and need to be maintained. There are also holes in the closure pieces that are allowing air and water infiltration. And we know that because we took some of these apart. The next slide, please. So we could see the insulation was discolored, and that's in my line of work, usually a good sign that you're getting water and moisture-laden air into the insulation cavity. Next, please. Because that stuff should have been pink, period. Not dark and grimy and sooty looking. Then when we took the insulation away and looked at the steel framed members there, we also noticed corrosion at the junctures, rust, obviously, on the vertical studs, as well as sort of a calcium-like electrolytic reaction where the sills hit the concrete at the base. That's in the left-hand photograph. Next, please. There are angles at the bottom of the curtain walls that I think were originally intended to support it. However, they're not really used, but nevertheless, they do support part of the curtain wall system, but they're not taking the main load for the whole 5 stories or anything. They probably provide support for the lower story or 2. And I'm not downplaying it, but there is corrosion, a significant amount of corrosion on some of these support angles too. One of the complaints that we came across initially in the job was the fact that if I'm in my unit, I can hear the person above or below. Or if that person decides to smoke, I can smell the smoke. Or whatever, if they pop popcorn, I can smell the popcorn pretty well. So here's some of the reasons why. There are pretty good sized openings around these assemblies that were just never filled. And so that kind of noise and odor, sound, noise and odor transmission is obviously going to occur and needs to be repaired and will be repaired as part of the reinstallation of new system. So I'll just, if we go back for just a second, sorry, going the wrong way. Oh, back. One more. 43% of the homeowners surveyed experienced noise and odors from neighboring units. So in terms of the questionnaire, that's a pretty good amount of people that are experiencing that problem. Okay, we can go to the next one. So where do the curtain walls occur on the project? The red lines are where the curtain walls are that need replacement. So every time you see a red line, you can imagine 5 stories of windows that need to be removed and replaced. Next, please. So there's the curtain wall. You can see it in proximity to the other issues that we talked about. Next, please. So why fix the windows? Well, we've got aged and deteriorating windows. There's a significant amount of water and air intrusion. We have the existing system can't really handle more retrofits. It's not designed to do that. It has very poor thermal and acoustical capabilities. And, you know, basically as we researched it through, well, what was the company? But there's a couple of, it's not UL, but it's one of those sort of measuring agencies out there. They basically give curtain wall systems about a 35-year lifespan. We're at 50. Fannie Mae, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, Fannie Mae. So if you're evaluating your building, Fannie Mae says you should expect to get about 35 years out of your curtain wall system. And we're at 50. Next, please. The benefits, you would get better interior air quality, you get better ventilation, the openings are going to be bigger, improved energy performance, acoustical performance. Of course, the safety factor improves, weather protection, keeping the building tight. And somebody asked earlier about mold in regard to the underfloor, but I have been advised that some people have experienced mold inside their units from moisture intrusion. And we haven't really mentioned that much, but that's something that can be avoided by the replacement project. Get rid of the noise and odor control issue, better privacy. With a new system, you'll obviously get warranty and service besides just a better look to it. We did bring a sample up here, so if there is a break and you want to take a look at it, this is a very small mock-up. So when you get to the openable part, you're going to find it's a little stiff and there isn't a handle on it. Those things can be worked out, but we wanted you to see sort of the size of the construction that we would be talking about and the quality of it. We originally started with a Conair system in mind that we would design to. As we've priced through Nautilus, we also asked them to look into alternatives from US Aluminum, from Oldcastle, and from Arcadia. And it seems like the contractors in town really prefer Arcadia. So that's actually what we're pricing, is an Arcadia system for this project. All right, so we can entertain questions about the windows if you'd like. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Bill Peach, 112. Just a couple, I think, simple questions, which I've forgotten already. Must be my age.
It was a long way from there. to
Yeah,
there.
it was. And then I blessed myself, so I shouldn't have done that. No, I don't remember. It was just a couple of.
Well, when you think of it, come on back. Come on back. That's fine. Feel your pain.
Yeah, hi, Robert Perry. I'm here on behalf of Nancy Greenberg. I was her late husband's best friend, and I do what Doug does. In fact, I didn't recognize you, Doug, because you got a lot more gray hair now.
All right.
But anyway, I've done this kind of work for homeowners association, so I have great appreciation for all the work that you've done.
A couple questions. Oh, by the way, your window expert is also a friend of mine. I saw him on a 36-story tower in Vegas about 6 months ago, Jim Kenway. So he now lives in Idaho,
He does.
but he comes down for these projects. The finish on this window wall system, is that a Kynar 500? So
Yes.
that's a pretty high performance system. So
Yes, it's a coating, and
I don't know, people probably don't know what that is, but I thought you might
it's
address
a
it.
fluoropolymer coating, so it's basically a very high performing coating system. You might want to call it paint, but it's not applied in the same way. And it has a lifespan that is really good without fading and chalking and things.
Yeah, the issue that came up earlier about accessibility, when Dr. Dave was alive, and he was in a little scooter, he actually asked me to come and look at this project and see how we could get accessibility for him to get down to the lower pool area. And then there's those bathrooms that are even dropped down lower than that. So at some point, if you want, I'll talk to you about, I'll share some of the thoughts I had about that, because getting access down to the pool area and down to the lower areas was a big concern of his.
And it really is a tension on all of our reconstruction projects, because what the attorney has advised is pretty common, which is, you guys are in a public facility, you don't have to do that, but yet people still live there.
Fair
They'd
housing
still
act.
like it to be accessible.
Yeah, the Fair Housing Act might have a difference of an opinion, that
Yep.
attorney's opinion, by the way, so.
Yep.
You're dealing with that instead of ADA, it's all accessible.
Yep.
The only other thing I had was, having done this kind of work with associations on many occasions, there should have been a reserve analysis done right from the get-go and then updated every so many years. So I'm curious if that's played a factor in the cost potentially for the individual unit owners, and what kind of analysis was done. They all have life expectancies for these systems. And the two that I could think of would obviously be the curtain wall should have had a life expectancy calculated in for some sort of replacement, along with some repairs being done periodically. Yeah, I understand. I was just gonna throw that out there, so hopefully it'll be addressed. The waterproofing system, of course, subterranean waterproofing, same issue, because I've had to deal with the exact same thing on lots of homeowners association projects. So some information I would assume at some point would be helpful to the unit owners. Thank you.
I think those are good questions. Yeah. And I think Bob and the board will address some of that.
Rod Neighbor, 354. I assume the new window system would eliminate that little pane of glass that opens out, that some kid or some pet could fall right out of, right?
Right.
What sort of guarantee will we get with the new windows, and how long would you expect them to last?
20-year warranty. Okay, thank you. 20-year warranty on the system. Right. Yeah. Nobody warrants the complete life of the system. They'll give you a warranty of a defined period of time, but getting to the end of the life is not normally obtainable. So there is, I think the 20 years is actually very good. Yes, sir.
Yeah, thanks. I remember my question. I think you've already answered it. As you were, during your presentation, you were saying that aluminum's window structures are not recommended in a coastal environment, which is what we're in, but it sounds like we're still gonna have an aluminum system, but it's gonna have a better coating system on it, is
It will.
what you're saying?
Yeah. So like, the guys that do the really high-end windows for custom residences, Fleetwood, you can get their stuff either with the Kynar finish or with the anodized finish. But the minute you tell them you're in proximity to the ocean, they say, you're just gonna have Kynar because we will not sell it to you in that way. So yes, it's not like people don't do aluminum systems in an area like this. They do, but you try to get the best performing system that you can. So that's why the Kynar is used. And Kynar is sort of like Kleenex. It's a name for a floor polymer coating. There are 2 or 3 or 4 other floor polymer coatings out there.
My other question has to do with that hallway system that was put in on Tower 3. Will that be replaced as part of this overall project also, since it's not necessarily that good a system? Okay. Thank you.
I've got another question or two as well. Right now in our units, when we close the windows as tight as we possibly can, then we are outside of the unit, we put our key in the door opens, we feel the air pressure, a significant amount of air pressure because of the fan system that is operating right now. Will that change? Will that be affected by these new windows? I would assume these new windows will be rock solid tight. So
Yeah, it actually could make that situation worse. And one of the things that we need to do in designing the replacement is to get a mechanical engineer in to look at the existing exhaust systems and evaluate whether we need to make any changes. We haven't solved that one yet, but we've identified it as one of our things to do in front of us.
And that, right. And so that'll be done prior to anything
Yes.
actually taking place.
Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Good morning, Tyler Abrams, 355. Just simple question. Are there going to be screens included in these windows, or the option for homeowners to install screens directly in the windows?
Robbie, do you know? Or Joe? I think we're planning on there being screens. Okay. Okay, so there's a budgeted amount in the cost for screens.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
It's with the new system and fire code. Now, isn't the window system considered a exit point, egress point? Because there's essentially only, or because you have a patio door and a front door, those two qualify.
I think in terms of a sleeping room, you're correct. So I think we do have to provide that, but the code's kind of weird in that regard because I think it only goes up a certain number of stories. Although by the time we design this, they'll all be the same anyway. But the point of the discussion, and I've always thought this kind of weird, is yeah, for the top 4 stories, you have to do that, but you don't have to do it if you're in the 5th or above. So, and I think
You
it's
just jump.
yeah, well, I think they're just thinking the access from the ground, you probably aren't doing it when you get to the 5th floor or above. Yes, sir.
Hi, Romy Cedro at 311. When you take out the windows and then you put in new ones, how long does it take? Because are the units habitable during that time?
That's a great question. Robbie, do you want to talk a little bit about how the owners will experience the process of reconstruction?
So because it's a curtain wall system, we're replacing the whole stack from the 1st floor to the 5th floor simultaneously. Because that whole elevation's coming off, we're going to be building a false wall on the interior of the unit. That's set about 2.5, 3 feet into the unit itself. because we need to be working on both sides of the window system when we go to install it. And that whole duration from us setting up the temp false wall on the inside, to removing and replacing the curtain wall, and then taking out the false wall and doing some restoration of the finishes on the interior, is about a 5-week duration from start to finish. And so, but that whole time, you can still live in your unit. We're not displacing any facilities that would make it uninhabitable. It will be completely sealed off, security-wise and weather-wise temporarily. So that's a good question for how the HOA wants us to work through this project. A little bit about our company. We are HOA reconstruction focused. That's our niche. So all of the projects that we work on are working within occupied spaces. And so when it comes to safety and security measures, we take that pretty seriously. And we've been able to implement all types of repairs successfully with maintaining a secure site. In terms of 24-hour on-site security, we did not plan for that, to provide that as a service. Typically, it's cheaper if the HOA had that hired out with like a on-site or on-call service. When we're looking at security, we're focused on making sure that the area of repair is secure at the end of the day, that there's no unlocked doors, gates are all locked up. Our scaffolding has had like a boarded up, so that way people can't climb the scaffolding to get into units. At the end of all of our access points are closed up and locked up at the end of the day as well. We have on-site supervision daily. We've planned for that. And part of his role is to check who's on site on a daily basis, monitor where the crews are working, and document all of that. So that way we've got records, and he's the last one to leave at the end of the day to make sure that everything's been secured. Welcome.
Hello, Michael Orfield, Unit 444, along with my wife, Adrienne Orfield. This has been an eye-opening presentation for me. I didn't realize the depth of these issues. Even in the windows, I wasn't aware of how badly corroded other areas of the units are. A lot of what you've presented has touched upon the why all this is happening. And a 50-year-old building is an answer beyond its lifetime expectation is an answer. I just wondered if your analysis has touched at all upon any implication of original design and original construction as being a part of the why this is happening, and whether we should even be exploring that.
Or what was the last part?
Original design and original construction as being part of the why that this is happening.
You know, to some degree, actually, that's the major part of my practice, is looking at construction and design deficiencies. And so we almost default there, but in this case, I think the focus has been more on what's a practical solution, what's the best solution for what's involved. The reason that we're showing the defects is hopefully to convince you that this is necessary and needs to be done. You know, to answer your question, I think that certainly technologies in terms of how window systems are put together have vastly improved in terms of how things are manufactured and put together. So it's hard to criticize what was done in 1972 versus what you can buy now in 2023. But that happens. And then I think other things happen along the life journey. we all now are more concerned about energy efficiency. So sort of by definition, the system is heavier than it was back then. So there's more effort that has to go into supporting that. We have to think about that more. Yeah, there's some things with the existing construction. If you've looked at some of the slab edges, there are depressions, or there are areas where the slabs have deflected, not to the point of structural failure at all, but it kind of goes back to the system that was installed in the first place. And, you know, one of the reasons we kind of shy away from the curtain wall solution is we got all these low spots that we have to deal with then. And now you make that come out looking good, you know, spend a lot of money to make that happen. And you're also then kind of living with the fact that you're already in a deflecting area and you want to add weight to it. So our curtain wall systems don't do that. And so, I'm sorry, I meant window wall. We shied away from the window wall. Thank you, Bob. He watches out for me. Thanks.
All right, thank you.
You get me wound up and going and I lose track of what I'm saying. So thank you. Are there any other questions?
Yes, I have a question. If you can hear me. It's Robert Haas, Unit 323. I have a Murphy bed next to the window. May
Yeah,
have to be
once
moved
again,
if they,
For Nautilus, you mentioned that you were going to build a temporary wall inside the units so that you had access to both sides of the window structure itself.
That's correct.
How deep do you plan on making that into the unit? Because that's going to impact, you know, how we utilize the space.
So we need about 2.5 to 3 feet in. Enough for a guy to work.
Yeah, I was
So-
thinking of probably at least 3 feet,
Yes,
plus the width of the wall. It'll be a little stud wall.
that's correct.
Are you going to have an access door in that?
So
that people can go in and out, or will
we
they go through the window opening itself?
primarily, they'll go through the window opening itself. Once we are able to get the glass in though, we'll be taking down that wall. So that way, we can make the final finishes on the interior side of the curtain wall.
So there will be some disruption.
There will be some disruption as we do the work. All the work is planned to happen between the hours of 8 and 5. Yes, Monday through Friday, no weekend work. It's still your home. We understand that. It's,
Thank you.
yes. Sure.
Do we know how many stacks approximately are involved in the 21% of the leaks?
We probably have that information available, but haven't filed it for this present. Yes, there's a matrix.
So we have a matrix that identified all the leak locations, but we haven't overlaid that onto a plan. So we do have that data available. We just have not put that onto a plan at this point.
Thank you.
Are there safety concerns with not replacing the windows? I haven't heard anything about safety. And I know we've remediated by putting in sliders and heaters. So a lot of us spent money on trying to remediate the cold
Yeah,
that way, but I haven't heard safety.
yeah. Well, when the curtain wall system was replaced in the hallway of Tower 3, the contractor that did that work reported a lack of connection of the existing curtain wall to the structure. So that's a safety concern. So far in our investigation, we haven't seen that. But I think that whenever you have corroding pieces of metal that are connecting to concrete, that is a concern overall. I think that the other kinds of safety concerns that we've talked about have been, concern about people falling out of the windows. That's another reason to change that current design that's there. I believe also that Long Glazing, another vendor that came out and did an analysis, also identified the angles at the bottom of the building as being corroded to the point of failure. So again, I think that we haven't gotten a comprehensive look at that. I think there's a suspicion that that's a problem, that the attachment to the building is a concern.
Gary Kurtzen, 332. You say you're going to come in 3 feet, so you'll have working space. What's going to happen to things that are going to be in the way? For instance, we've got soffits with lighting in it. I know other people have other things.
Yeah.
Going to build around those, or are those all going to have to be removed?
I'll let Robbie answer that, but I do want you to know that one of the things that Nautilus is really good at is letting the homeowners know what they're doing, what to expect before they get there, and how it's going to impact their interior, if at all, and when they're going to need access to the units. So I've asked him to talk about that a little bit, but I think your question is a good one, because obviously every single owner has furnished their interior differently, and so there is a need to deal with that.
So that's going to be taken more on a case-by-case basis. If we're able to build around what's existing and keep it watertight and safe and secure, then we will. If we can't, then we will make modifications and adjustments. As Doug just mentioned, because we specialize in HOA reconstruction, part of our team and our dedicated staff has a position called a homeowner liaison. And they are the go-to person for each individual homeowner that coordinates with you before we even step foot in your unit. We set up a in-unit consultation to go over the expectations of what will happen, where the work will occur, what items will need to be either relocated or shifted away from the work area. We identify if you have pets, so that way we have a laundry list of items that before we even get started in your unit, we know what to expect when we get in there, and you know what to expect as we're doing the work. That position also allows for any other questions throughout the whole project. There's 85 units. So we're going to be working in multiple units throughout the project, and that's to implement the repairs at the most efficient manner. And so with all that coordination, having that dedicated staff is needed to help keep everyone on the same page communication wise.
Not all the people are full-time residents, so what happens during the time when they're not there as far as coordinating all this? We have to keep coming back and forth?
So we communicate either telephone, we can do Zoom meetings, we can go through email, whatever is most efficient for each individual homeowner. On the preference scale, we don't have one. We can work with you in any capacity. When we do work within units, not everyone is always home during that time, and we'll make accommodations to schedule either getting a key to access prior to them being home or, and dropping that back off to them when they're back on the property. So we'll make accommodations either way.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Michael Orfield, 444. Just commenting on the liability issues, the security as far as those are concerned. First, this just comes from me. In discussing those windows, the word insanity comes to mind about the design of those floor windows that open out and take the screen off. Your dog, your child, anything goes out that window. An attorney here would also be talking about a open and obvious danger. We're all on notice of that danger. That attorney would be talking about punitive damages. I mean, this is a serious and significant issue. It can't be, just, well, let's just move on or keep those windows closed. To me, it goes beyond the pale that they were designed that way in the first place. I don't know. I guess that was allowed in the 1970s. That's, like I say, just coming from me. I wanted to ask, do we have an opinion from our attorney about our liability for those windows as they currently stand? And should we have an opinion from our attorney about that liability, so that perhaps we can impress upon people the importance of going forward with this change?
Want to take a break? Did you have one more question?
I just wanted to let everybody know I've had a lot of experience with Nautilus. I've been present, and my office has been present when they've done destructive testing in individual units throughout the Southern California. They do an excellent job, and I commend them for that. Been around for a long time, back when Val Hoy was Valentine Construction, because that was what, 40 years ago. Nautilus. So just in case anybody was concerned about, yeah, their coordination with individual unit owners and the work that they end up having to do, and then they do a great job. So.
Great, thanks.
Question?
Okay, so we haven't talked cost yet. We're going to go to slide, I think, 82. And keep in mind, we just got these revised cost estimates 2 days ago. So can you hear it? You cannot hear me? Maybe somebody could turn the question microphone. There's a little knob right there.
I turned it off.
Anyway, all right. So anyway, so these are just going to be very high end. We don't have a lot of details. So if you put slide, it's the one. That's it. That's it. Okay. Here are the costs. We will work with Nautilus, who did the estimates, and get more details out there so we can see what makes up these costs. But these are the totals right now. So we talked about the structural repairs for the podium slab. That's the first one, 670,000. Waterproofing replacement, which has some costs in there for landscaping and some accessibility improvements. That's 5 million. Window curtain wall is 8 million. The plumbing repairs in the catacomb that they talked about was 500,000, and the balcony repairs is 240,000. Now, all these costs include engineering, permitting, and in the case of all but balconies, a 5% contingency, and the balcony repairs has a 10% contingency. So that's all built into this total cost here. And it comes to a lot of money. 170,000 per unit. Next slide. And I'm gonna, so I think I don't need all these slides. I'm gonna go through these very quickly because we get to Bob. Structural repairs was 670,000. We just said that. Waterproofing, it was the 5 million plus another $500,000 for the catacomb piping repairs. Here's the waterproofing we talked about. Next slide. They've done that. Plumbing issues. There's some samples there. Done that. Okay, talk about the curtain wall. So Doug Whitmore explained the difference between the window wall and the curtain wall. And I think he explained that the curtain wall, the benefit of the curtain wall and why we have a curtain wall system, and the fact that you can't piecemeal a curtain wall. It's all or nothing deal. So many homeowners, we saw the percentage of homeowners have leaking windows. Now, if you think, well, let's not do the window wall, let's do the waterproofing first. Okay, well, guess what? We're going to be spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to fix all those leaking windows and make temporary hodgepodge repairs to a 50-year-old system that needs the whole thing replaced. We don't do it now all at one shot. We're spending a lot of extra money that we don't need to. It's best to get it all done at once. Next slide. So yeah, I think they talked about the balconies. They identified 11 high priority needs. I got a call from a homeowner and went and looked at that. I want to add one more 12 to that one. You guys didn't see it because you didn't go up and look at the slab, but her slab is all cracked, the slab. 16 balconies is medium priority, showing large cracks in the stucco, and 23 is low priorities. And I guess you said your estimate was only for the high and the medium priorities. Okay, and then some balcony issues. Now we're going to move on to Bob Cavan. So I wanted to get to him. So Bob's got some talk about a reserve study, what he's doing with financing, how he's going to help with a loan for the association. I'll turn it over to Bob now.
Thank you. I am Bob Cavan on the board of directors of the association and the treasurer. We recognize that this is a significant undertaking, but it needs to be done. I think after today, you all have a pretty good idea as to why it needs to be done. Bay Scene is 50 years old, and the reserves have been underfunded for most, if not all of those years. When everyone bought their condo, they did so because this place was the premier property on the bay. I would say if you just look at it, you would still think it's the premier property on the bay. But as has been shown by the consultants, we may look good on the outside of the building, but the inside has deteriorated. And to ignore this will just compound the problem. I want to make a few comments with respect to the catacombs and just a few things with why things have to be done down there. Before we could even get these bids and they could even look at it, we had to clean out the catacombs. If you went down in the catacombs, you found lots of block, lots of gravel, sand, and construction debris. It took 3 months to bring that out. To get down into the catacombs, it's not easy to get down into the catacombs, and it's a series of many, many different rooms that you have to go into. When I first moved into Bay Scene, if you needed to turn off the water to your unit, you needed to turn off the entire water for the entire building. There was turnoffs now put for every stack. So if someone's working on a stack, you can just go in and turn that off. But to turn that off, the plumber has to go into the catacombs. So in connection with this, you can get lost down there in those catacombs. And you've got pipes and other things that you're tripping over. There's no lights down there. So when you saw those pictures, they were certainly with artificial light taken down there. So what we need to do is to put some lighting down there so that somebody can go through, and we need to put some directional signs so that somebody doesn't get lost down there. And we need to be able to, when plumbers have to turn off the water to a particular stack, we need for them to be able to easily access it. To get down into the catacombs right now, it's a hole that you go down through and you go down on a ladder. That we're going to, in connection with this, make that a lot easier, because every time somebody needs to work on a unit, they need to turn off the water, somebody has to go down there. And sometimes they forget to turn the water back on. Then somebody else calls somebody and says, I don't have any water, and we have no idea why they don't have any water. And so there's a bunch of little things that are going to be done in connection with this to make it easier for the future. Which all of that has nothing to do with financing. Could I have you put up the slide for the proposed special assessment? Page 21, slide 21. From this slide, you can see that when we actually got into this and priced out, the first column shows how much that we have had in the reserves for replacement. And the money isn't in the reserves, but what we were reserving for. And you can see that several of those items, like the structural repairs to the podium and the waterproofing, were not even included in the reserve. This reserve is redone by California law. It's redone completely, and someone comes out and looks at it every 3 years, and it's updated every year with respect to cost. But you can tell from this that costs have gone through the roof compared to where the people who did the reserve study had estimated where this would be. You can see on there that if we had reserved, we've got a 1.35 at the $1,350,000 in reserves at the end of last year, 2022. From that last slide, I'm still on it. You can see that what we would have reserved for, or were proposing that we would reserve for, was if you see the $5,291,500, that was the amount that we would have reserved to if we were actually reserving, and to show us what our deficiency would be. The actual cost for those items, you can see right now, is $14,410,000. So consequently, overall, with respect to what the reserves, our reserve study showed, and when you look at that reserve study, it shows that we were funded to the tune of about 11 or 12%. The reserve study would have had $13,564,000 in it. Just with this change, it would take that up to about $22,686,000. And realistically, based upon how far apart this is, I would think that our reserves for the things that we should have been reserving for, or could be reserving for, is going to be somewhere between about 25, 26, and $30 million. So when we, now you can go to the next slide. Obviously, you know that what replacement costs are defined as the current estimate of repairing or replacing major common area components such as roofs, windows, plumbing, security systems, and landscape over the long term. Before you think, well, why didn't the guys that did the reserve study have this kind of stuff in? Basically, they'll say right in that reserve study, anything that's over 30 years, we don't even put in the reserve study. I don't think anybody was thinking about waterproofing. They certainly had it for the windows, but we've moved those windows up over the last 10 years, but we had no idea that it would be $8 million. I mean, this is a very big surprise to us. When we were talking about it before, I can remember when we thought we could do this for $1.4 million. So with the $1,350,000 that we had in reserves at the end of last year, compared to basically the $22 million that we would have, and that's that reflected on that green line up there. We have funds to pay for about 6% of the items, 6%. If you basically divided the amount of money we have into the amount of repairs that we had to do, everything. In the reserve study, and that'll be the next, they will indicate that industry standards are if you're funded to 0 to 30%, we're at 6%, that it would be very weak. If you were from 31 to 70%, you would be fair, and to be strong would be over 70%. I can tell you from looking at some of the buildings and things downtown that the dues in many cases are $2,500 or more per month. This association, instead of being in the early days, probably $70 or $80 a month, should have been in the $600 or $700 a month. And the association has been underfunded since the beginning. And I don't think that's uncommon, but you can see why there's a need. The costs go on whether you actually put the money up or not. And I know from being on these boards, the discussion as to whether or not to raise dues significantly is a really difficult discussion, which there's always lots of different opinions. And you have as many people that don't want to fund the reserves as people that know you should. And I think after this, everybody in this room knows that you should. Because had we been starting at the start with $600, $700, $800 and had it up to $2,000 now, the money would be there to pay for these improvements. But you wouldn't have had this waterproofing in the estimate because nobody even thinks about stuff like that. And obviously it's more than 30 years, so they would say that they can't even put that into the reserve study. As far as financing options, if you could go to the next slide. Obviously, some people will want to pay it up front in full, the $170,000. We have talked to some lenders that will take the income stream of the condo association as security for a loan. In most cases, in talking to the lenders, anywhere from 10% or to 30% of the people will take a loan. In most cases, 70% pay in cash. When talking to the lender, they had spent a lot of time, effort, and money with respect to the Harbor Club condos downtown across the street from the convention center this last year on a $6 million loan because people said they needed a loan. When they ended up, nobody took the loan, and arranging for that $6 million loan was just a big, basically, cost and waste of time. So I'm going to say, if you want this association, because we have to change our CC&Rs, and we're doing some changes to the CC&Rs, and there'll be more changes to the CC&Rs before we get done to allow us to do some of this kind of financing. They will loan us the money for 10 years. And the rate today, if it closed, they set the rate it's a fixed rate. So it's a 10-year fixed rate. They will set it 5 days before funding, 5 days before you actually take the loan. Today's rate is 6.5%. I don't think there's any doubt that by the time we have this project ready to go, that rate's probably going to be closer to 7, maybe even just a little bit higher. But some of the people can pay cash, but everybody has to vote for this, and including from our attorney. Everybody has to vote to allow the association to borrow the money. And so consequently, if 10 people want to have a loan, that would be obviously $1,700,000 if 75 people decided to pay cash, or if we worked out a term. And all of this stuff is it sounds like it's real simple, but it's not real simple because you've got to be fair to everybody. So we still haven't worked out what if the people don't put all the cash up front and they want to put it in over 2 years? I'm sure we can probably work something out. But how do you get the money from the loan in over 2 years and make it equal? So that is not so clear at this particular point in time. But I don't think there's any doubt that we will be able to get a loan with the association's income stream being pledged as security, and that you could finance in effect under this 100% of what your proportionate share is. You can work out what the payment would be per month over 10 years, because in addition to the dues that the association has, if you took $170,000 over 10 years at 7%, you're looking at a fixed rate payment of about $1,975 per month for 10 years. Obviously, once the loans are paid off, you go back to paying the normal homeowners dues. So that's pretty much what I have. We have another gentleman that's going to speak to what I talked about before, in basically like home equity loans, or if you want to refinance or reverse mortgages, there's lots of ways to pay it, in which case you would get the loan against your unit and you would pay cash in effect, like some other people that might pay cash themselves. Yes, Simon.
If we decide to use the second option, association borrows funds, which will be the collateral?
The collateral, it's the income stream of the homeowners association. There's
But it's not enough.
no real estate.
So is that a real option?
Is that a real option?
Yeah.
Well, I will tell you, and when I've talked to, because there's all kinds of things to work out with our property management firm also, but apparently these lenders have done work with our property management firm, but our property management firm thinks about this a little bit different. But we can't resolve every situation until we know. I think I can work that out with the guy who owns the property management firm. But what did you want to know specifically again?
No, I would like just to understand if without collateral, we can use that option. And other question, just to all of us will be decided, the interest rate just to get a personal loan or just to buy a new unit, any apartment, it's below 5%. So it's not decided at 6-7%. It's just like
It's not the same because you don't have the real estate as the security.
yeah, that's one of the, for that reason is my question. So is a real option to use like the homeowners association borrows the money?
We did that because when we talked about home equity loans and things before, some people said they didn't have the income to be able to qualify for an additional home equity loan. So we looked for options. There's a few of the banks that specialize in making loans to homeowners associations. Those are the banks we've talked to. I've talked to other ones. I'm still talking to other ones, but I'll tell you, it's really hard to reinvent the wheel with associations who haven't done a lot of it. I mean, these guys have done hundreds, I mean, even thousands.
Because probably it is a fair option. That's why I'm asking.
Borrowing, you mean borrowing individually?
No, use the homeowners.
The association borrowing?
Exactly.
That's certainly a real option. But
Okay,
but we are going to be looking at the 7% interest rate, I'm sure. It's going to fix 5 days before we actually fund. And you all know how interest rates have been moving. I mean, yes. Hi, Ronnie.
If we did the big loan option and people later on wanted to go ahead and pay off their $170,000, would there be any prepay penalty on that loan?
What they've told me so far is there's no prepayment penalty. And can that be done? Yeah, it could be done because we're gonna have everybody have the same term. Either you're gonna borrow the $170,000 at the 7%, 10 years. So that basically we can track everybody's the same, and you want to sell your unit 2 years from now. And the guy buying it says, I'm not taking over that loan. And he say, okay, you can pay off your loan with the proceeds from the sale of your unit. And the answer to that is, I am going to make that happen. They don't volunteer that, but I'm going to make that happen.
Well, one other question comes up if, let's say there's 10 or 15 people that just want to write a check.
Right.
So that would lessen the amount of loan that the HOA had to go get, but you'd still be responsible, right, as an owner for maybe part of that?
You're going to be responsible for your own, but if someone didn't make the payment, the answer is the same as if they don't pay their dues right now. I mean, we go after them, we push it to the max.
I see.
We've gone through it. You go to the point where you actually foreclose on the unit. We've never had to do that. And where people have had loan on the unit, even though they've ran their dues up, the lender has ended up paying it and bringing it current. It should be the same as if you didn't pay your property taxes, basically.
Okay, well, I guess I'm gonna have to admit that a lot of this was my fault. Because I was on the board in 91 and 92 when I first bought. And I was part of a group that didn't, not me, but the rest of the people on the board didn't want to raise dues at all. We were at 300 a month. And Jack Peters and I almost got hung in effigy because we wanted to raise the dues $20 a month. Which we eventually did, and we got them raised, but $300 a month back then is equivalent to $653 today. So actually, even the dues have gone up to $1,000. That isn't much more than what inflation was on the original $300 a month. And if you take the 14, I bought a Bay Scene because I could buy anywhere I wanted. In fact, I had one in escrow in 75. Unfortunately, I didn't close. I bought something else. I wish I had bought the penthouse I had lined up then. Everybody bought here because they looked at other places and they liked Bay Scene better and they knew it was built better. If you take $14,410,000 and you divide that by 50 years, and then you divide that by 85 units, that's $3,390 a year. Well, if you owned a house, you'd expect to pay some of this kind of stuff or run into after 50 years. I mean, how many of our friends have had to tear up and redo waterproofing and put in French drains and redo, roofs and everything like that? So the amount of maintenance this bill sounds like a lot of money, but it isn't really that much money when you look at it that way. Also, you look at the replacement cost today of what our asset is, Bay Scene, with all the great stuff that we have there, this $14 million is a very small percentage of that. So I think we need to take a look. Sometimes, you first get hit with these numbers and you go, oh my God. But then you take another second closer look. We're going to be getting rid of the window liability that this gentleman brought up with those little swinging doors. We're going to get rid of that. People will sleep better at night. Probably our insurance company and lawyers would really like it too. But I think this has been a great presentation, and I think that if we can get a loan like what you're talking about, even traditionally in a real estate business, since we've been in it, 6-7% is not too bad. So.
Thank you, Rodney. Appreciate your comments.
Did you hear that?
I've got a question.
But yes.
I saw something about us having our HOA increase like $453 a month starting in February. Is this in lieu of that?
I don't know anything
There was
about
something
that.
with the reserve study that came out, something with the.
Oh,
it clearly showed it going up in February, so.
If you look at the reserve study, they give us very alternatives that we could increase the dues to and how many years it would take to bring the reserves back up to where they ought to be. And I mean, when you look at those, I mean, they're,
I took it as that's what's happening. That's.
no, that's not what.
Okay.
What happened the last time is because we didn't raise dues because there's a lot of pressure put on people not to raise the dues. If you're on this board, you would find out. It's the last time when we raised dues, because we raised them the maximum, we could raise them 20% in a year. Hello?
Hi. Yeah, my question is, right now, we all have constructive knowledge of what's going on. Is the mic off?
No. Tim, I think we lost, speaker's microphone up here went out. I don't know if the other one went out here.
But I
Can't hear us.
That's gonna have to, it's just too much.
First,
Jesus fucking Christ.
Hold up, because his microphone went off. We gotta figure out what.
Check.
What was the
Test,
company?
it's not working. I think it's working.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. There's no question now, everyone in the room on Zoom, we all have constructive knowledge of what's going on. Where are we at as far as a prospective buyer looking at Bay Scene? And even more important, there's going to be a period between now and when we actually decide on a course of action when it's implemented. Is it possible to get loans on the property? Would Fannie and Freddie say no? Or an underwriter, having been called attention, there's these kind of problems. What, can you address that to some degree?
Nobody's gonna buy it.
I can only address it from the standpoint of experience. I've been in the real estate business for 55 years, done a lot of properties. And I've been president of the San Diego Association twice of Realtors, and the Apartment Association and a number of other ones. I would say two people that put their units on the market in the last 7 or 8 months, that they had to pull them off the market because buyers would not buy because of the windows and they didn't really know about the water stuff yet.
Yeah.
I think that it would be very difficult to sell a unit right now. I mean, this is all going to be, it's full disclosure. I mean, there's nobody that's going to buy a unit that doesn't get full disclosure as to what's going on. You can look at it on our website. We're recording these things for any owner to look at. I think that it's going to be difficult till we get this going or close to done to be able to sell a unit. Now, can you sell a unit? You can sell anything, but do you want to take the haircut that you're going to take? And so consequently, if you think that $2 million sale is going to stand up anywhere, it wouldn't stand up today based upon what's actually happening in the market in the first place. We were looking at 2.5, 2 3/4, 3% interest rates a year ago also. And as I went back to the National Association of Realtors and listened to their economists talk and so on and so forth, we are at, if you bought the same house today at the same price or at the current prices and at the current interest rates, your payment would go up about 125% from where it was a year and a half ago. So why is the market, we're doing about half the sales we did the year before. Why are the prices coming down? It's interest rates. That wouldn't be the only problem here. We've got other problems here, but we've got to get these things fixed if we want the units to sell for maximum value. You could sell them. I mean, maybe that one that you sold for 2 million could sell for $1.1 million, $1.2 million. It's whatever a buyer will pay. I mean, there's plenty of people out there that'll pay, but they're not going to pay the price.
Bob, I've been thinking about this as far as sales. I think you're incumbent on disclosing to any new buyer that's looking at buying. You may have somebody who wants to pay cash, and what I would say to them is, okay, here's what the value is, here's the appraised value. Take $170,000 off of it, because that's what your bill is gonna be, your participation in fixing this, you can still sell the property. The other point that I'd like to make is, if we take the property that when you bought, or when it was brand new, it was up here, and maybe down now it's, you know, with the deterioration and stuff like that, I think $14 million for the things that we have.
Well, look at it, but something pays off.
Compared
Flop
to
it.
some of the other things that I've heard from other architects and stuff that they've had to go in and fix things is a small number. But if we bring it back up to here, I think that every dollar that we put in for these windows, for this waterproofing and fixing our podium slab is going to be returned to us in spades. I think it will actually definitely enhance the property. It may be a 1-for-1 ratio. I don't know. Usually you do renovations, you're lucky to get 50 cents on the
God, this is gonna be destroyed.
things that nobody's going to have to probably worry about again for 50 years, hopefully, and hopefully not us.
Agreed. You're absolutely right, Rodney. And after this is done and the repairs are done, we're going to be up in the 60% funded range, maybe even a little bit higher, just depending, because obviously we won't be so short like on the windows and these other items. I mean, we're gonna be significant. It's going to be a very strong association. I can tell you in the 21 years that I've been on this board, with respect to sales, there is only one person who actually inquired as to how underfunded the reserves were, which just shocked the heck out of me. And I asked her, how did you even look at that, or were you really looking at it? She said, no, I didn't look at it. My daughter's a CPA and she was looking at the paperwork and saw that it was that far underfunded. But realistically, if you're in good markets, people ignore it. If you're in bad markets, they beat up on you. Yes.
I'm Allison, Tower 4, and I have a question. If we want to pay ourselves and not go on the 10-year payment plan, can we set up payments so often for that 170, or do we need to just write one check for that?
We are looking into that. The answer is, if everybody were to do that, yes, there's no problem at all. The problem is how do you get a loan from a lender for 10 people or 15 people? And how do you say to everybody else, you can pay $5,000 a month for the next 2.5 years or whatever we need to get to the number? But if you're going to a lender, the lender is not going to say, okay, this guy wants to get his money now. We're not doing 10, 15 separate little loans, even in effect. They are, but the lender's making one loan to the condo association for the number of people. We can account for it if everything is basically the same terms and so on. And I'm sure I can convince the property management firm to deal with that. It's not that complicated. I thought it was when I started, but after I figured out how to do it, it's not that difficult. But I think we're going to attempt to spread it out over a period of time. And we're going to have a couple of votes on this current ballot that's coming up in March. They have nothing to do with the assessment. We're going to vote for that later. But these have to deal with the ability to allow the association to have certain people pay it in upfront and other people pay it over a period of time. I mean, obviously these CC&Rs are not really set up for that kind of thing, but we have ability to borrow money under the current CC&Rs from the very beginning, but it's not set up that a certain percentage could get a loan and a certain percentage would pay cash. We're going to attempt to answer your question directly. We are going to attempt to spread it over a period of time and start it pretty soon after we actually have the election for the assessment, so that we have enough money. Because when you're starting these contracts, the contractors need a lot of money up front. I mean, when you're talking about those windows, we're not going to be able to give them $5,000 down and we'll start paying you by the month. I mean, those windows are very, very expensive, and so consequently, there's big upfront costs requiring cash.
I can, ask a little interruption here. You're about done, right?
Yeah, I'm done.
Because we were so far ahead of schedule, I had David Stein. Could you, David Stein, was going to be here at 12:45. We're not going to be here then maybe. So he's going to be on Zoom right now. So we're going to go to David, our mortgage broker, with some ideas how homeowners can get the loans. So can we bring David on Zoom and then he can give his presentation. People are going to ask some questions.
Hey guys, how are you doing? Can you hear me?
This is David Stein, loan specialist from Principal Equity Group. So he's going to give some options for homeowners on getting loans. There he is. Hey, David, thank you.
Hey guys, how are you doing today?
Good.
Good. So, basically what I wanted to talk about is kind of some of the options to take money out of the property. But as many of people have, have spoken here, obviously, when you go to sell this house, you're going to get a reduced amount. If you do go to sell the condos and whatnot, you could be forced to, with the disclosure. So there are a few different options of loans that you could do to take out the money as well. I think that I put a slide for you, but the first option is probably conventional loan, cash out. The rates have dropped. I know there's a lot of talk about, the sky's falling with the federal government raising the rates, but those really don't have to do with the 30-year fix. The 30-year fix goes according to inflation, and inflation has been dropping over the last 2 months. So we're now seeing rates in the 5% range, whereas we were at about 7% about 2 months ago. So rates are coming down a ton right now, and it's making it a lot more affordable to get that done. So basically, there's a few different refinances that you could do right now with the current state of the property, such as conventional loans, business bank statement loans, and even stated income loans. So if you don't have any income and you have equity, you can do that. If you run a business and you have business bank statements, you can actually use that to cash out that money as well. And or conventional loans can be used for cash out as well. There's also another option of the HELOC, which is my next slide, which is the home equity line of credit. Now, we do have fixed and variable lines of credit. This would be, let's say you have a 2% or a 3% interest rate, and you don't want to get rid of that. Well, you can actually take the home equity line as a second mortgage on top of the property. So let the 170 or so, or whatever you need to borrow, you can actually do that as a second mortgage. The rates on those also are coming down. They went up, but now they're coming back down as well due to the inflation being is coming down. Inflation was very big 2 months ago, and now it's starting to supersede with all the rate increases. Usually when the government raises the rates like that, it takes a few quarters to see the results. So now we're seeing the results of those initial raises. And so now that they had raised the rates so much that when they're raising 3/4 of a point at a time, we're going to really see those in the next few months here. And the rates should come down. I was thinking by summertime, you're going to see rates again in the high 3s, low 4s again. That's kind of my prediction. I've been doing this for about 20 years. So I've been through a bunch of different markets, the 2008 debacle, and a few of those others. So again, the second would be the home equity line of credit, taking cash out on the property, especially if you have equity. And a third option would be a reverse mortgage loan. These are available to people that are 62 years of age or older. You need to have equity in your home, of course, or your condo. And there's no income required on this, no credit scores required. It's strictly based on your age and the amount of equity that you have in the property. So these are really good for people that, they don't have the income per se, and you have more of the equity piece, and you're able to, basically access that equity. And to pay off these loans, there is a few different options that you have to do that. And you don't have to pay fully amortized payment. You can actually pay an interest-only payment. You could pay a fully amortized payment. You could pay a half payment. And then also there's an ability to do a no payment version, which the no payment version is basically you would pay no payments. And let's say your payment is $100. They just add that onto your principal, and you can do that as long as you want. When the rates do come down, you can also refinance. I don't think we're going to see rates like we of the 7% variation stick around like that, just because they've raised the rates so far to curb inflation. It's actually had an opposite effect. When inflation comes down, so do the rates. And that's kind of, those are kind of the few things that you could do to access the equity of your home. Many different loan programs. Obviously, since you guys control the HOA can get all the paperwork that is needed to provide, to get these loans warranted and whatnot. So there's just a few versions there for everyone to access equity in the property, or just to get a cash out loan or whatnot. And I can actually be available. I'll put all my information here. So if you'd like to talk one-on-one, I have plenty of time in the next, day or two, or even today, if you need any help, with any questions that you might have for your specific, individual situations. Everyone's going to be different. So what one person can do on a loan, maybe another person can't do. So again, it's best to just meet. I'd like to meet you one-on-one, and we can go over your personal situation, what's best for you, and how to access that equity rather than, paying cash, as it's always better to, finance it. If you do have the cash, obviously, you can do that, but to access the equity in the property is a bit easier and less and more forgiving. So again, it's best if if you have any questions or anything, I can answer those now. And if you have any individual needs, we could go over those as well.
Yeah, I think it would be a good idea if you want, David, give your contact information real quick, or they can ask me, and I think they should contact you and be the best way, because that's probably not a really good setup now. Everybody's got different needs and all. But if you want to find out more about these things, you can contact David. There's his information. If you don't have something to write it down, we can get you the information. But and then give him a call, and he can help you, and you can see what you're doing. You kind of have an idea, a number now. And I would say, if you want to, worst case scenario, if everything went great, maybe start figuring out July. July would be when you'd want to get the money. So that's just.
And that's perfect, because by the time July rolls around, we're going to see much lower rates than we're even seeing now. Like I said, we're looking at about 5% on those rates now. I think we're going to touch in the 4% range when July rolls around. Again, I've been in every market there is so far here, and I've seen the ebbs and flows, but we're trending in a good way here in San Diego. Another really good thing I'll just touch on, kind of real estate related. There's only about 1,700 units, single families, condos, townhomes for sale in San Diego. So the inventory is literally at about a 12-year or a 10-year low. A lot of people are locked into these low interest rates. They're not willing to sell their homes. I think that is good for the homeowners in this room, because, if there's a lot of inventory on the market and these prices go down, because there's not a lot of buyers right now because of the interest rates, which was touched on earlier here, it's better to have less inventory when you have the higher rates, because when the rates go down, I feel values are going to go back up again, or you're going to see values trending up, because more people can afford it. And if the interest rates are a little bit lower, which I do feel they're coming, I feel we're going to be in the 4% range, within a month or two here, maybe 3 months, we should see 4% rate interest rates again. You're going to see a lot more buyer activity. There's a lot of people on the sidelines waiting for either the rates to go down or the property values to go down. Values have gone down probably 20% in San Diego since the top of the market, and it's all induced by the interest rates. Almost 100% of the value now is derived by the higher interest rates. People were really scared to buy anything with a 7% a 7, in front of that interest rate, a lot of people were less likely to look at that. So, right now I feel like rates are trending down, and it's good for the people in this room because not only are you going to be able to borrow at a lower interest rate, but also you're going to be able to, see the values spike up a little bit, especially once everything is cured on the property. So that's kind of just my 2 cents. I feel like July and August, we're going to see the best rates we've seen in about a year, since the rates had gone up. And I think, starting in about a year ago, the rates started going up. So that's just my opinion.
Well, good to know, David. Thank you very much. And I will give anybody their contact information. If they ask me, if they send me an email, I'll send you his contact information. You can contact him. So thank you, David.
Thank you all. I'll be stick around too if you have any questions. I'll be on.
Does anybody have an easy question for David now? Or you want to? Okay. No, just wait. Yeah, we'll get specifics and we'll contact him. Well, I want to now explain, in case you don't know, what it's going to take to pass a special assessment. How does it work? How does it work? So we have 85 units here at Bay Scene. So a majority of units have to vote first off. So a majority, that means 43 units have to vote. So if only 43 of the 85 units vote, and the rest say, I'm going to ignore it, I don't want to see this problem, I don't want to think about it, you don't vote, then it only takes 22 votes to pass a special assessment. So if all 85 units vote, then it's going to take 43 votes, a majority of the units, to pass a special assessment. So basically that's how it works. Simple as that. Okay, so will you put on slide 96, please? 96. Let me find it. In addition to the special assessment, Bob has already talked about this. We need to do some changes to the CC&R. The one he mentioned was one we were going to have with the election, but these are some other ones. So these changes to CC&Rs would probably come out the same time you're voting for the special assessment. One would be a change to be able to borrow the funds. That's CC&R paragraph 8.3. So it allows us to borrow funds on this behalf of the association without changing the CC&R. To do that, we cannot do the borrowing. That would be where the homeowners that want to have us get a loan for them, that's what we would need to do. The next one, if the loan agreement for those homeowners is more than, I think you were there before, requires, the top of it says requires homeowner approval, the header. So go back a little bit. Oh, okay. Well, whatever. If the loan agreement is more than 10 years, more than 11 years, you then need another change of CC&Rs, paragraph 5.3. Finally, we've already been told that the contract is going to be at least 18 months to do the work. I think it'll be great if it's only 18 months to do the windows and the excavating for the waterproofing and all. But right now, our CC&Rs say we cannot have contracts in excess of 1 year. So we're going to have to change CC&R language so we can have a construction contract that's longer than 1 year. So these will be things, changes to CC&Rs that will be included when we ask you to vote for the special assessment. Okay, so keep that in mind. It's all one package. See what I got. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Slide 101. So as this is, can you find slide 101? So that's next steps. Okay, so this is what we're talking about now. So the next election of officers will include this change of the CC&Rs, paragraph 4.8, division of assessments. And Bob kind of explained this, where if I'm not going to use the association's borrowing of funds to pay for my special assessment, I'm going to pay for it myself. I'm going to have pay my normal HOA fees. Somebody that's going to use the association to borrow funds, they're going to pay an increased amount to pay for their part in their loan. So in order to have a division different assessments of different homeowners, we have to change the CCNRs. And we're gonna change that language with the next election coming up very soon. Then the additional election will be what I just talked about, the other three things, the special assessment and what I just talked about. So, Judge, did we answer your question on the windows? Okay, yeah, I don't think we did. So I wanted Bob Bob deals with our insurance people, and we have some issues where our insurance rates went way up a couple of years ago for the property at Bay Scene. And I mean, we've done some things to bring them down. And I think possibly having the different types of windows, a safer window in there might have an effect on our insurance. What do you think, Bob? Maybe even a homeowner's insurance in their unit. I don't know. No? That's true. Okay. So well, then would you ask your question again, and Bob and I'll come up, Judge, ask your question again, because I'm not sure. So this is, yeah.
I just wondered if, from as far as our own attorney is concerned, whether we had an opinion from him or her regarding the current state of our liability, given the windows at the ground level that open out, and our knowledge of them, and whether it's a standing, liability that we have, because as long as these things remain unfixed, and we know that it's a clear and, an open danger, that we could be on the hook if anybody got hurt.
Well, in our meeting with him, that was not mentioned. Okay, we could.
I think the answer is yes.
Will you email us that question, and so we can then get it to him in an email, ask that question? That'd be good. And we'll follow up on that one. Yeah. For example, many years ago, maybe 15 years ago, initially back in the 70s, they designed railings to be 8 inches apart. Well, guess what? A little kid could fall through that. So we as a board, we put in the middle bracket that helped another liability. So we've done, but it helps. Oh, you got a question? I can't hear you though. You got to get.
Two, I'd like to know if something horrible happens and we don't pass this, what are our options then? Can we go back and split this into two and take another vote, or how long do we have to wait in between votes?
Well, you can take votes, whatever. Yeah, we can take votes whenever. We can take immediately another vote, but so I don't think there's any, it's a 60-day noticing period. So every time it's 60 days to notice the vote.
So I just want to make a point. I'm Janet Wingard in 234.
Make sure you're into the microphone. Zoom can't hear. If you can lower it, if you lower it a little bit. There's a little thing to lower. Somebody help her out.
Is that better? Okay. When you talk about voting it and doing it or not doing it, I looked up, and the Davis-Sterling Act that was passed in California says that unless otherwise provided by a declaration of common interest developments, the association is responsible for repairing, replacing, and maintaining the common areas. And I think this qualifies under that. This is definitely something that needs to be maintained and replaced, and not doing something about it is basically negligent on the association.
Adrian Orfield, 444. I'm going to follow up with that just because I've always been concerned about that awning window and the liability exposure. And I appreciate that you're going to go back to the lawyer and talk about what that exposure is.
And I also appreciate the fact, yes, we're in the process of trying to do something about it. And perhaps ask the attorney what effect that has, if anything, if something horrible does happen, if a child does fall out of an upper window. What is the exposure now to the association and to the homeowner? And more importantly, if this is voted down and we do nothing, what is the exposure liability-wise to the association and to each of us with respect to the dangers of those windows? We are on notice.
Okay, well, please put that in an email and we will, yes. Yes, Gary.
I either didn't understand something you said earlier, maybe you clarify. You mentioned if the HOA is going to borrow the money, they need a vote of every single member. Then you said you change the CCNRs so that the HOA can then borrow money. Will that then say that instead of 100% vote, it would take whatever?
Okay, I think I know. So I think what Bob was trying to say is, say only 10 people want to have the association borrow money for them. We have to still do a voting like we would do a special assessment, where we would pass a special assessment, get all the members involved in the voting process. It has to be a majority. A majority would then support it. So it's not just those 10 people that want the association to borrow money. It's got to be a change to the CCNRs that we'll all have to vote for. And when we say vote for, vote in the way you pass pass the CCNRs or pass a special assessment. A majority of those who vote.
Will that allow if the CCNRs are changed, will that allow the board to go borrow 14.4 and just on board approval without approval of everybody else? Like you said, it would take 100% of the people in the association and for the HOA to borrow 14.4.
Come on up, Bob. You have minutes. Yeah. I don't want to try to answer that.
Gary, would you repeat that again?
I think something was said earlier, before a loan could be made to the HOA in the tune of something like 14.4 mil, that it would take a vote of the homeowners 100% for them to commit to that type of a loan.
Not 100%.
That's what I thought was said. Maybe I.
No.
Said everybody had to be a affirmative vote. No.
No.
It doesn't. Okay. Okay. That's all.
Hi. I was just wondering if all the repairs have to be lumped together at the same time, or just start with whatever is more important, or just do whatever is more pressing or more important.
What do you see here that's less pressing? Did you see the whole presentation?
No, for example, to me, the window situation is not as life and death matter. I mean, it's not.
But the windows are a curtain wall system and they're all or nothing. So the homeowner who's got leaking windows or is afraid of a child falling out, to them it is a very pressing situation. So how do you determine, it's like I said, what I tried to explain earlier, the windows, it's not like we're putting individual windows in, we're putting a system, we have to replace a system, okay? And they documented a pressing need for that system to be replaced. Many, you saw the corrosion. You're saying your windows are fine, but do you know that your windows might open fine, but the structure holding your windows in place, unless we go in there and really do an evaluation of that, we don't know what kind of condition that is. That your structure could be where it's attached to the wall, could be very corroded, and be next earthquake tremor comes, it could fall off. So, it's hard, just because your windows operate to your satisfaction doesn't mean your windows are okay. It's the curtain wall, it's not the windows. So then you can't, so how are we gonna say, we're gonna do this for that? Because it's all, I think, it's all very, important.
I was wondering if everything has to be lumped together.
Yes, that's good. Overall, that's what we're gonna do at first, because overall, it will cost us less money as an association. So if we don't fix the windows now, we've got a quarter of the homeowners are going to want us to come in and reseal their windows because they're leaking. That's going to cost us several $100,000 that we spend now, and then whatever it's going to cost 5 years from now, whatever to replace the curtain wall, we're going to spend it more. So it's going to.
Well, the gentleman here just said that it's not, we're not in any imminent danger right now. I mean, it's not
I think they said that they don't make decisions like that. No, I mean, the next tremor that comes, shakes the building, who knows?
everything can happen. I can die tomorrow.
A question, Bob?
Let me make a comment with respect to that. If something really did happen, if you look at the reports, you can get on the website, you can look at all the reports. If you look at the one from Long, when they inspected it, they thought there was a potential that those windows could collapse. I don't want that in the file if I'm in a courtroom, I can guarantee you. But it's there and we can't get rid of it. It's there. I can tell you that these construction costs are going up faster than anybody could imagine. When we built units back in the 90s, mid-90s, 95, we were building houses, sticks and bricks, not counting the pavement and all the fees and so on and so forth. We were building houses for $42 a square foot. I built houses in the mid-90s for $42 a square foot. Today, it's about $250 a square foot. Costs have gone up significantly and they continue to escalate. We're not in the 90s anymore, Mr. Banks. In effect, I mean, things have changed significantly out there, and that's why people aren't doing the things that they used to do. I mean, these houses are not, our condos are not selling for $2 million because we could rebuild them for $500,000. I mean, they're selling for $2 million because you probably couldn't replace it for the $2 million. So if you're out here doing this, people have no idea what it costs to build this stuff and how long it takes and what it takes to get through the city. It's unbelievable, city, county, or anywhere, any of these jurisdictions. Why does the cost of housing cost so much? Government did it, and now they're the ones who created it. They wouldn't let you build anywhere. And now they're the ones who think they can solve it by getting in your pocket and taxing you to death. But we keep voting those people in, so I guess we might as well get used to it. But there's too much out there right now that we have to do this. It'll be the same thing with respect to that building that collapsed in Florida. 2 years before that building collapsed, everybody knew there was a problem. They let all the owners know, and it was going to cost them so much, and the owners voted no. You know what? I think they made a serious mistake.
Well, Bob made most of the points I wanted to make in the argument, but since I walked up here, I just want to add that I really appreciate all the work that the board has put into this. It's a huge undertaking, but this has been dragging on a long time. And obviously you're getting new information as we go, but every time we hear about it, the cost has gone up. The prices just continue to go up and up and up. And so I am strongly in favor of voting this through as quickly as possible, getting started as quickly as possible. And, and finish obviously as soon as possible to keep the costs, they're already atmospheric. Let's keep them from going even higher.
Once this is done, I think you'll be surprised at what this property sells for versus the rest of them on the bay.
Yeah,
question, on the logistics of this, election.
One person.
So
Yeah, could be.
I'm pretty sure I understood this correctly. We need a majority of all the homeowners voting in this election to make it work, correct? And that's true both for the changes in the CCRs that will be proposed and the assessment, the 170,000.
That is correct.
And will those be separate votes? Could the CCR changes pass and the assessment not pass, or is it just going to be one package, yes or no?
They're separate.
They're separate. So each of the CCR issues will be a separate issue,
They're separate.
and then the assessment will be a separate.
That's gonna even be a different election. It's not on this election.
So those are two separate elections. That's what I'm trying to clarify.
Right, and the reason we're putting that on right now is so that we can go out and negotiate if people want the loan from the association to take it, so that we can go out and negotiate with lenders and have the absolute right to be able to tell them, if this occurs, we're gonna take the loan unless we end up like a Harbor Club and everybody says they figured out another way to get the money. I would much rather that everybody in this organization would say, let's figure out our way to get our money ourselves, because this is not easy putting this in place. We're satisfying so many different people, even including our own management company, and I'd hate to have to change management companies over this. But I've spoken with him at length, and he's got some ideas as to how he thinks things ought to go, and he doesn't think you can get these kind of loans from lenders. Well, I can tell you, a year ago, I didn't think we could get these kind of loans from lenders either. But when you look with certain banks that do it and have done thousands of them, I'm sure it can be done.
Okay, so there again, I want to clarify. Stage one is to change the CCRs. That's an election.
We're going to do that on March 8th with the election of the officers, and there's a couple of items that are going to be on with respect to that on that election. Had nothing to do with assessments.
And assuming that passes, then you're going to, at that point, negotiate with some lenders to see what kind of terms you can get to put that out to the association. Is that right?
The answer is yes, but we're probably working with the lenders before then even.
Okay, assuming that they're going to pass, right? And then when are we going to have this election on the assessment?
So March 8th, I think it's the 8th, is our board meeting where you'll seat a new board, okay? So the election will be going out for that anytime. And that will include the one change of CCR I talked about. You want to do two? All right, you sure? Okay, one or two changes to CCNRs with that election. Then and soon after that, we just now got cost numbers, like I say, 2 days ago. Okay, so we are going to work to start the 60-day process for the special assessment. I didn't know how this meeting would come out. You know, people could come away, I'm too confused. I know all these questions. So we didn't want to commit to when that would be. We wanted to get the information out there. We're getting good positive feedback. So I'm confident to move forward with the assessment vote. We'll do that as soon as possible. And that will include a vote for the assessment. And then with that, a couple of CCNR changes on that same ballot with the assessment. So there'll be two different elections.
So the first one, March
Well,
8th.
You'll have to have them in by March 8th, because that's when
March
we
8th, and then 60 days after that would be the earliest that we could pass this assessment.
about.
Okay, thank you.
Question?
Yes.
I'd like you to clarify, I have someone.
Hold on. Who's there?
Oh, this is Ed Miller.
Oh, okay. Ed, go in.
To clarify, the collateral on an HOA loan. Apparently it's going to be, it won't be our individual units, but it would be the revenue from the dues. And if not enough people paid off the HOA loan, that would be a major disruption, because that lender would then take the monthly dues, which would greatly disrupt our operations. And in fact, the vote on whether to change the CCRs, it wasn't mentioned specifically whether you could vote against an HOA loan.
or whether you had to vote on changing the CCRs. If you were going to oppose an HOA loan, it'd be silly to change the CCNRs. And I think at one point, I agree, Bob did say it would take 100% of the homeowners to approve an HOA loan. But then it was later, he said it wouldn't. He didn't say what percent it would take. I presume it'd be a majority. But there will be people that will put their money in who do not want to get involved with an arrangement where the lender could take the HOA dues and greatly disrupt the operation of the project. So, yeah, I guess the question is, will we have an opportunity to vote on whether specifically to approve an HOA loan, or do we have to vote on whether to change the CCRs to make that kind of a loan possible?
That vote is going to be on March 8th.
Yeah, I know when it is, but I mean, will we have a chance to oppose an HOA loan? It seems to me that could be a liability for, and a problem for people that put cash in and didn't require the HOA loan, because if the collateral is the monthly dues of the HOA, that's a problem. It could be a problem.
Well, you're absolutely right. Okay, we don't assume that there's going to be that many people who want to have who will need the loan. In fact, when we've talked about it with different people, but we don't know where everybody's at with respect to it. We thought that there may be 10 people. I don't think we're going to have a situation where 10 people default, but we certainly could have a situation where 1 or 2 people default. I can tell you, we are much more on it with filing liens and actually going in for foreclosure notices, which may sound tough, but I'm going to say if you will know about it after 3 months if you don't make your payments.
Well,
and certainly,
yeah. If the HOA doesn't satisfy the lender making payments, the people who didn't want an HOA loan are still going to suffer, because the lender will be taking the HOA dues, which will greatly disrupt the function of the organization.
Your question is absolutely, what you've stated is absolutely correct, but it's not going to be that significant, and unless we have 70 or 80 people that want to get the loan, in which case I think we would reevaluate that significantly.
Well, I think you made a great discussion and description of the pros and cons of the HOA loan versus individual loans, but I think you tended to say that we could get this HOA loan, even though Manus didn't approve of it, you could convince him. If you think that, as you did say at one point, if you think that it's better for people to arrange their own loans privately, I think you should state that clearly.
If I had my choice, we wouldn't even be dealing with that issue.
Great. Okay, thanks.
And that's what I tried to do last time, but then we got so much feedback. When you sit on this board, you get things that nobody else in this room knows that you hear about.
Yeah.
And so we got feedback that people, even though they had plenty of equity, could not get a loan. And so consequently, they asked us to look into, and we looked into, and I didn't think it could be done, but it can be done. So I was wrong. There's banks that are actually making these loans, but in most cases, they have never seen more than about 30% of the people actually ask for the loan. But if you're in a position to get the loan yourself, just as was indicated by the lender here, it's cheaper. Let me tell you, when you got the loan secured by the property, the rate is cheaper.
Absolutely.
You're going to pay more if you get it through the association.
If I were a lender, I'd much rather have the individual's unit as collateral than have the good faith of the HOA.
That's exactly why the rate's higher.
Yeah, exactly. But I do appreciate all the work that you and the rest of the board and the people have put into this. It's a major thing, and I think you've convinced us that it's absolutely necessary to do this work soon.
I really appreciate you bringing this up and pushing it, because we would rather that the association did not have to get the loan. We don't want to be dealing with that. It's tough. Every aspect of everything we do with the management firm, with the banks, with everything. Let me tell you, like right now, it is so difficult to get insurance for a significant portion of California. There is no way in the next couple of years, regardless of how much that premium goes up, that we would change carriers and they'd come and look at this. I mean, we probably couldn't get it. So consequently, we're keeping our mouth shut right now. When you've got an insurance company, you keep your mouth shut and you don't change them. I mean, some of these people turn in claims like crazy. I can tell you, we would never turn in a $5,000 claim at our apartment houses. Never. You're an idiot. I wouldn't turn in a claim for $25,000. But some people turn in claims for $1,000. I mean, you know what? They're looking at how many claims. They don't care how much they are. It's a number of claims. You're not going to get insurance if you start putting in claims. And we're not putting in claims if we can help it. So we're dealing with larger deductibles because you're not a good business person if you do, because you won't be able to get it. There's a lot of things that go on in running these associations and running properties that people never, ever have any clue with respect to it. But when you do it a lot, you see what you have to do. You may not like us paying $25,000 on a loss, but let me tell you, it's a lot better than going from a $35,000 a year premium to a $150,000 a year premium. And if you look around this state, if you are anywhere near the brush, and I mean, you can be 3 miles away, you are having a difficult time getting insurance.
Thank you.
I just want to follow up with what Ed said. So those homeowners that maybe have heard this presentation, heard Bob saying he's going to try to get a loan, association get a loan, because you feel like homeowners that feel like they have no other option. Why don't you at least get David Stein's number or somebody like him and talk to them first before you go the loan from the association? We might find out then with the reverse mortgage option or some other options that you're going to pay less money that way. We would not need to even get the loan. But so that would be really good. So maybe now that you have another option, to look at least calling something like a David Stein, do that first, and then if you can't get anything, then let us know and we'll go from there.
That's a good way to approach it. And I thank Bob for bringing that up, that we'd be paying a higher interest rate and would be more expensive to have the HOA make the loan than if individuals made it. And so it does make sense what you said. The individuals approach the bank to see what they can get for an individual loan, and only if that's impossible, resort to an HOA loan. Thanks.
Martin Hall, okay. Martin?
He's the Buddha.
What was it? The thing I was upset about.
Because well, how many texts are you guys, and you guys could ask then?
It's set up so that even if we put in money, a lot of us do, we're still taking a risk.
People would do
With the HOA, yeah, and those, how would you live?
I agree.
And it would be
I
cheap.
agree with you.
Yeah.
But there are some homeowners that
Who is this?
This is Todd Lesser.
Okay, Todd.
All right. Well, I'd like to address several different issues. First is the liability question that answers who would be liable. Now, the very fact if a homeowner knows that there's a dangerous situation, I can tell you if some child falls out those windows, the homeowner will be sued and probably the association will be sued. Final liability will probably be on the homeowners and under their policy, but it could be both. But besides that, the issue is at the same time, there are waivers that can be signed. As long as I would advise the association to give notice to everyone that the windows, are, if you're unaware of this, are dangerous. But in my opinion, to force everyone to change their windows isn't. You can sit there and easily seal those windows. If you're concerned that you have children in that unit, or you're concerned that there's ever a dangerous situation and you've been put on notice, you could seal those windows so they couldn't be opened. And I don't think that should be a basis to force every homeowner to spend a big portion of their money to replace it. Now, as far as the windows falling out, I'm going to look over that report, but I have kind of some concerns that you sit there and say, well, it may fall down in an earthquake. Anything can happen. But this is not like we have a report that the building's going to fall down. Maybe the windows will. Plus, I think, it's an older building. Like anyone has an older house. Everything may not be able to be perfectly new, but if there's a little bit of rain that comes in, it's San Diego, it's not that bad. Or maybe you put a little silicone to do it. I find it hard to believe that it's more money now to seal the windows, the few that are dripping, versus saying, hey, make everyone rip it out. The other issue, I just think we've kind of have this alarmist situation. I mean, even if that, I don't think we have anything saying the structure is going to fail and just fall. Even one person said it hadn't even been fully inspected. If we need an inspection, then let's have the whole thing inspected just because we have corrosion, and look at, say, maybe that can just, it's the part by the dirt. Maybe we just have to have that repaired. Again, I don't see that. Now, as far as the garage situation, again, I don't understand why we spent money having the garage sealed from the inside when it was clearly coming from the outside. It's like, if you have a boat, you don't seal the water from the outside, you seal it from coming in. So it has me kind of concerned of who was driving that car when that decision was made. Nevertheless, is now, I think before we spend the money, having some studied or plans drawn up that to have that whole thing of the water intrusion done, I think we should look at alternatives. Like, for example, French drains, for example, putting a vapor barrier like just on the top layer, because it doesn't rain that much in San Diego, just maybe around the edge of the building without trying to stop the water, putting a brand new barrier against the building. Literally just put a sheet of plastic. They have special stuff, and maybe 2 feet from the building, maybe 5 feet from the building, and put like rocks on top of it. I've seen that, and that would stop enough that no further moisture would go into the building. Plus, I'm concerned that I looked at a lot of these warranties, and you could only get a warranty for maybe 10 years. So we're talking about spending what was like $5 million, something crazy, or it was $160,000 a unit to seal that garage, that in 10 years we may have to do it again. I mean, that type of money is crazy. I think we should try the least cost. I don't think we should have a plan to have that done. That's going to, who knows how much those plans are, and then have it bid out. We should look at alternatives. And plus, I think there's certain areas that they're leaking. Maybe we have to remove some trees that are causing intrusion in the building. Maybe we have to look at removing those ponds and maybe doing a different type, like doing like a lot of the ponds they used to do was cement. Well, they found there's earthquakes, those things crack. Now, if you look at anyone who has a koi pond, what they generally do is a thick rubber liner. And maybe that's the type we have to do. So it's flexible. If there's an earthquake, we never have to worry about it. But, we could even possibly drain the ponds for a month and see, and then check the moisture level to see if it's still in there. Like I said, I think we're going so far, moving ahead, being alarmist. We don't have a single report saying this building's going to fall down like Florida. If that was the case, that would be something. And that's what I have to say.
All right, well, thank you. We understand your opinion, and that's fine. We're not saying the building's going to fall down, but that's good. That's good. That's your comment. Thank you, Todd. Anybody else?
I gotta find out who Todd is.
Yeah, Bob, just one more question. Right now, we're at 170,000 per unit. But it sounds like it's going to be 6 to 9 months before we have any real firm numbers on costs. So is there going to be, are you capping at 170, or will we know 6 months from now what the actual assessment will be?
When we go out for the assessment, that's going to be the actual assessment. If the costs go over that, we do have contingencies in each of we have a contingency in each one, 5% mostly. Otherwise, we'll have to rely on reserve funds to pay for any overages. Or ask for another assessment. Well, the other thing about a special assessment is, so there's two things. Bob just said last year we did raise our monthly HOA fees up to $1,020. That was a 20% increase. If we we cannot go over that 20% increase every year without a special assessment. So another option would be definitely if we start to see the cost going much more than $170,000 and we got to pay for it with reserve funds, we might definitely have to raise it 20%, the monthly fees, but maybe we would have to ask to say, can we raise it another 40% or something like that to help pay for the overages and all. So the more we delay, the more chance of those overages, but we do have the contingency built in to help avoid that.
You don't want to delay. John wants it.
Okay. And
I had one quick question on the
What do you have to do again?
223.
223.
223. I'm like, I can't remember. With regards to the CCR that would potentially allow the HOA to borrow the money, is that CCR going to be specific for this incident? In terms of, since there isn't anything on the book that really allows the HOA to borrow money.
The CC and
Just
her.
thinking ahead and years down the road, if there's a change in board, what would prevent the board from borrowing money without the homeowners knowing?
CCNRs right now allow the association and the board to borrow money. What this is doing is allowing us to have differential payments between people who paid all cash and people that are making the payment for the dues as well as the payment on the loan. Yeah, I think we can. It was in the original CCNR. I can tell you this board is not going to be borrowing any money without a vote, okay? We wouldn't even think about it.
It would be specific. It would be specific to this.
It's specific. I can't imagine any board if it was significant. I mean, if we were short and somehow we used all the reserves and we had to go out and borrow $100,000, that's one thing. When we're talking about this kind, I don't foresee that happening. But we would never, and I can't imagine any board who would, without clear understanding of what we were doing, and we would ask for a vote. We have to ask for a vote. I mean, you'd be nuts if you didn't.
Okay. Martin, you unmuted? You're going to ask your question?
Yes, I think I am. Thank you. Two different issues. One, the issue of liability of the lower part of the windows. I think that's an issue that is valid now. It cannot wait until all the process is decided, etc. I would suggest, following somebody that preceded me, that each homeowner writes a waiver or assume responsibility for his or her own unit, or that we take a collective measure and just weld a metal bar in the middle of the window. And until everything else is sorted out and the new wall, etc., because an accident can happen now without waiting for the decision and all the planning and everything else. The other issue, and it is something I understand is very complex. There was one collapse in Florida. I don't know how many hundreds of buildings are there in Florida, and if they are showing the same type of problems, etc. So that's something that we are responding in a massive way to an anecdote. Yes, the probability is not zero, but we live with risks. That's all. Thank you.
Can I make a comment to that?
This is one you don't have to live with.
One building has collapsed in Florida, but if you've paid attention to the news, a whole bunch of buildings have now been inspected and condemned as of that, incident.
I don't mean it.
The attorney pointed out to us that as a result of that building collapsing, that FHA and those government-backed loans are requiring buildings be inspected now before they'll make loans on the unit. And you're going to just see more and more of it. I mean, we're not getting more lax. We're getting, as I think Doug said, it's just hardening. As the years have gone by, it's just hardened. It's getting, a lot of things that were problems before are not problems anymore because we're just forced to do it. It's hardening the entire property from doing these.
Somebody on Zoom, I think you're not muted. Okay. All right. Lynn Kumra?
Oh, Lynn Kumra. Interesting.
Is it Lynn? Who's Lynn?
Yes, wait. Where is it? Yes? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Lynn.
I don't know how to do this. I'm here.
She's a nice.
Yeah, no, Lynn, ask your question, Lynn. You can't hear us. You can't hear us.
She should have been to the meeting.
That's the $1 million question.
What is it?
I can answer that question. If we didn't vote it in, what would we be next? We'd be looking for 5 new members of this board.
Yeah.
And you're all eligible.
Oh, wow. Don't give people ideas.
My name's Ellen, many of you know me, and I was board president in the past, along with Bob Cavan being on the board and before Bob came to the board. And this leakage in the garage is not new for the catacombs. Way back when, 15 years ago, we had issues. They're continuing. We have never gone down there and actually taken a look at it. And yes, it's got to be partly from trees. We've taken off 25 trees or more off the property. It was overplanted to look lived in when we moved in. And so this is not something new that just happened because of Florida. This is something that boards have been trying to deal with, being pushed back. And now it's come to roost. We have to do something or we'll be condemned and we'll all be looking for a new place to live.
And just with one of the questions that came up a little bit earlier, and what have we done and you can't do it from the inside? Let me tell you, we had people come to this board who said they could do it from the inside. So when you look at those 2 walls that I saw that you had in the picture, they told us that we could inject the wall and it would go through and stop the water even all the way to the outside. I guess you can, in the end, you've got to fix it right. And I think what this is the right fix. And we were trying to do it from the inside. And we spent an awful lot of money doing that. I mean, it wasn't tremendous, but that stuff they were injecting was like $150 a gallon. And we used a lot of it. You saw on those 2 walls that were kind of brown instead of gray.
Again, Adrian Orfield, Unit 444. I just want to make a comment. I know from looking through past records of the association, the windows issue has literally been discussed, dissected, researched for over 8 years that I know of.
Oh, more than that.
Yeah. Long time, 50, okay, whatever. Long time. This isn't new, but this is something that we need to just quit talking about it. We need to do something about it.
Right.
And the same with respect to what we now know is a major problem as far as the waterproofing is concerned. And I'm concerned that if we don't do something now, that we're looking at a lot more expense. And again, I'm sorry, but we're looking at liability. Also, I think we've been shown that the past repairs haven't worked. And I do want to
This is
compliment
one. Oh, she wrote this.
for getting top-notch people in here to take a look at all of this 6 ways to Sunday and come back and tell us, this is what you're looking at, these are what your problems are, this is what you need to do. So, and I know that the board has spent a lot of time looking at alternatives. Alternatives don't work. And I think this is what we've been told now by the professionals, and we need to listen to them. And that's my comment.
Maybe this will be the last question. I missed what the remediation will be on the windows when you're doing the window repair. Because you'll be taking out blinds or shutters, or what's the follow-up to that? Do you replace that, or is that going to be an expense for the homeowner?
In terms of remediation on the inside, we're going to be putting everything back to the original condition that we found it. Having said that, the new system changes a little bit of the interior in terms of how, once we've attached the new curtain wall, there's new what we call beauty metal, and that covers connection points on the interior side, which might modify different transitions with your ceiling or your flooring. But if you're talking about window treatments and window blinds, all of that would be reinstalled after we're done with all the work. But it is currently.
Okay, great, well, thank you. Hour to spare. All right. Hour to spare.